I'm ready.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here at the Beverly School Committee. Tonight is a Committee of the Whole meeting, and it is Wednesday, February 26th, if you can believe it. The year is 2025. We are using a remote hybrid meeting model this evening to allow for remote participation, but we are thankful for BevCam, who is providing real-time streaming and broadcasting of tonight's meeting on Channel 6, High Definition 1073, and on its YouTube channel for government. We are able to provide a remote meeting platform due to the Acts of 2021, specifically Chapter 20, which began June 16, 2021. It's been twice extended and now further extended to March 31st, 2025. This allows local governments and boards to, among other things, hold meetings remotely by suspending the need for the quorum and chair to be physically present. I will note that Beverly has had approval from the Attorney General to have remote participants. However, when this act expires at the end of next month, the chair and quorum do physically need to be present unless new legislation is passed that will allow a continuation of the remote meeting law. I understand that the governor's omnibus bill might include such language, and we will wait with bated breath to see if that is the case. As I mentioned, tonight is a committee of the whole, which means there is no opportunity for the public to address the body. This is our working meeting. The next opportunity to address the body will be at our regular meeting on March 12th, 2025 at 7:30 p.m. We have the option to sign up in advance at residentvoice@beverlyschools.org if you'd like a link to be invited to join us remotely. We also encourage you to be here in person at the Beverly Middle School. We will have a sign-up sheet at the podium that evening. Or, if you prefer, you may send your remarks up to 3 minutes in advance to the email residentvoice@beverlyschools.org for the chair to read those remarks into the record. Joining us today are members of the school committee and leadership and district administration. I'm going to do a roll call just to make sure that we can all see and hear each other, and so that we have a roll for our meeting records. I am joined in person by Kimberly Coelho.
Here.
And Ken-Ann Mackenzie DeFranza.
Here.
Karen Robinson.
Here.
Jeffrey Silva.
Here.
Lorinda Visnick.
Here.
And I'm Rachel Abel. We do expect the mayor in a moment. We are also joined by Superintendent Suzanne Chirocek.
Here.
Our Finance Director, Emma Puglisi.
Here.
Assistant Superintendent Dot Flaherty.
Here.
Our Executive Director of Operations, Aaron Brown.
Here.
And our, let's get this right, Director of Special Education and Pupil Personnel, Bethany Splansky. Here. Joining us online is Dr. Andre Morgan. He is our Director of Opportunity, Access, and Equity.
Here.
We can hear and see you, Dr. Morgan. Thank you so much.
Wonderful.
Our first order of business this evening will be the Pledge of Allegiance. I think I'm going to put Ms. Coelho on the spot. I can't remember the last time I've called on you, so please lead us in the pledge.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much. Our second agenda item is the approval of meeting records, and while our steadfast stenographer, Liz Curran, I'm trying to remember her last name now, she got married, she did send us those files. I think we neglected to distribute them to the body, so I'm going to table agenda item number 2 until our next time together. And with that, I would ask Dr. Chirocek if she wouldn't mind jumping right into her superintendent's report.
So good evening, everybody.
Microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. Sorry about that. Good evening. I have only one item on the agenda for the superintendent's report tonight, and that is a budget update for FY26. I'm going to just walk you through sort of where we are in the process of putting together the budget and give you some information on that. And so first I want to thank Emma for joining me up here at the table. Emma this is her first budget cycle with us, so she's been great, and we have made a couple of little changes to some of the way we're presenting things, so hopefully you'll appreciate the work that we've been doing together. I will start, as I always do, that whenever we talk about budget, it's important that we remain steadfast to our district goal areas. These are the goal areas from our district improvement plan, designing the equity continuum, empowering educators, and innovative practices. And so we hope that our budget reflects all of the values and the goals that we set for us as a district. These are the priorities that were identified earlier in the process during the months of November, December, and January when we were working on it. These are not very different than they have been from the past years that we've had. Takes a look at social and emotional mental health, trauma and stress, looking at clinical and behavioral services, professional development opportunities, and then continues working with the BPS connections. Under curriculum and teaching and learning, we know that we've been focusing a lot on our pathways at the high school. We have our innovative pathways that we have been talking about, our early college pathways. Those are all designations that we've been working really hard to garner from DESE, and we continue that work in that area. Continuing to address our academic supports and scholars clubs, and looking at elementary library supports. Operationally, we're continuing our work on sustainability. Some of us were this evening at the food fight at the Cabot, which was great. And tomorrow we have another one of our operational sustainability committee meetings. So we look forward to that. We're going to keep our eye on grant acquisitions, and actually tonight we're going to have a lot of conversation, actually tomorrow night at your FNF. Tomorrow night at FNF they're going to have a great conversation about grants and all of that, so you can tune in tomorrow if you're interested in learning more about that. And then we wanted to take a look just at our fee structure in a couple of specific areas, and that was one of the priorities that we set. And as far as communication, ensuring that we have ongoing engagement with the community, sharing of district procedures and timelines, and then also, and this is a really important one, the legislative advocacy for state-level conversations around school funding. I think if you are following the news or reading any of the newspapers, this is a big topic, a lot of conversation and discussion around the state-level funding for schools. So those are the priorities that came out of all of the conversations that we all had. And so this year, our budgeting approach, again, we have Emma, and Emma and I are a new team. It's nice to have a new perspective on things. Jean and I were really great together for the last 6 years, and I tried to not change things too much because I think there's something good about familiarity, at least of the numbers when they come at you. So, for example, Ms. Visnick later will be looking at your favorite yellow sheet, but also bringing some visual perspective to some of this. So Emma has a couple of ideas for us as we go forward. So we also are looking at this budget cycle through a zero-based budgeting lens, which really means that we want to invite each principal into the process. We recognize that we have 8 school buildings, 8 school communities in Beverly, and making sure that we're looking at each one of them individually. What are the needs of that particular building? At our elementary level, our schools vary from building to building, whether a school has a large special education program or if they have a smaller program that serves a different population. So the needs of each school vary a little bit, and so we're really taking into consideration trying to avoid a cookie cutter approach and just designate, well, it doesn't matter what you need, you're each going to get one of these, to principals. What do you need? How can we help you meet your needs in your building? So we believe that it will help the building principals and the directors actively engage in the budget process. And as we think about allocating resources, they'll be based on enrollment, but also on the building and program needs in that building. The staffing levels for next year are going to be based on anticipated enrollment and those program needs. Using the zero-based budget lens really will help us build a budget on district goals and evolving needs rather than historical resource allocation. So that's sort of been one of our goals that we set for each other as we were going through the process, to kind of take a look and see how we could keep true to that. Familiarity is good, right? So this is a slide you see all the time. Factors that impact the 26 budget. We have, this year, we're looking particularly at contractual obligations. We actually have an advantage this year over last year. We have concrete numbers. We know what our contractual obligations are. We don't have to be predictive of what they're going to look like, so that's helpful. We will be looking at our enrollment, and we're looking at our enrollment a lot around transition years because we have varying cohort sizes. So, for example, when you see the enrollments, the rising freshman class is much smaller than it was the previous year. The rising 5th grade class is as large as the one was last year. So when we look at allocation of resources, we want to be mindful of where our large cohorts of students are and what kinds of resources they'll need in those areas. We have special education increases that I'll share with you this evening. we have a big bucket of other anticipated increases, which I'll also share with you this evening. And then finally, and I know that all of you were here last year in the budget season. We talked a lot. Jean especially made it a point to let everyone know that while we had healthy reserves and revolvings, we were digging into our revolving accounts with offsets, and that while we normally, for example, would carry over 100% of our circuit breaker, we anticipated that we would only have a carryover about 60% at the end of this year. And lo and behold, I have the information. You'll see that, and it shows that that prediction came true, and that's exactly kind of where we sit. So a unique challenge is building a budget and focusing on revitalizing some of those revolving accounts. Is that a good way to look at it? So those are the things that I'm going to talk about this evening. Here's our first little visual. Normally, this is a slide with just numbers when I did it, but Emma has a nice pie chart for us. This is our appropriated budget from FY25, $78,267,064. And as you can see, the salary and benefits are 85% of our budget, and the other large bucket comes out of district tuitions. Beyond that, the other areas, supplies and materials, contracted services, equipment, transportation, and utilities are all between 1 to 3% of the budget. But this is a nice way to look at how are we spending our money, where is it going, and understanding as we go forward, those are the areas that we're going to have to concentrate on. So this is the contractual increases to include wages and benefits for FY26. And again, these contracts are settled, so these are actual numbers. We know what those numbers are in advance. We have Unit A, Unit B, Unit C, and other employees. Those are the 4 categories that we typically look through when we're addressing the increases. And you're aware, I'm sure, that we have step increases and COLA increases for our units, and so those are depicted here. So in Unit A, our cost of our steps is $663,828. The cost of the COLA is $1.712241, and then the cost of lane changes is $500,000. For our total increase for Unit A of $2,876,069. Unit B, cost of steps is $17,484. A cost of the COLAs there is $101,746, and our total increase is $119,194. Our Unit B is our administrators, assistant principals, directors. And then Unit C is our paraprofessional unit, and the cost of steps for them is $221,691, where the cost of the COLAs for Unit C is $463,339, for a total increase of $685,30. Our other employees, those would be individual contracts that are, there. Does that include the AFSCME and
Yes.
AFSCME and?
So it includes our custodians, our clerical, our transportation folks, our crossing guards, individual contracts, but also other non-contracted or unionized staff. So lunch monitors, folks like that.
And so the subtotal for just contractual increases for wages is $3,997,103. And then our other compensation increases would include our health insurance, deferred compensation match expansion, stipend COLAs, and stipend expanded eligibilities, Unit A and Unit C tuition reimbursement program, longevity for all units, and our payroll taxes. And so I won't read all those numbers. They total $964,304. So that means that our contractual increases to wages and benefits from FY25 to FY26 is $4,961,407. So that's just a picture of one of the areas that we have to account for within the appropriated and/or our revolving accounts. Yep, sorry.
Does these numbers include
Microphone, please.
You put your,
Do these numbers include anticipated parental leave and those other types of costs?
Yes, so we have increased in this year's budget from the reserve for negotiations our long-term substitute lines, which would specifically, and our short-term substitute lines to sort of compensate for.
To project for that?
Exactly,
Okay.
for the cost of those long-term leaves. This is the cost of the employee's salary, which would include their leave coverage.
Okay, great, thank you.
right. So basically, they're already in the budget, so they're not necessarily increases from 25 to 26. We already accounted for them in the 25 budget. All right. Yes, more questions?
Go ahead, Ms. Visnick.
Can we please go back to the beautiful pie chart?
Yes, that one. Isn't it pretty?
All right, so I want to ask about transportation, and in particular, I want to ask about the out-of-district tuitions. Like, where is the breakdown there with the transportation for our special ed students, which we don't always get great reimbursements, if any, on?
Yes, so those would be included in the transportation
In the
bucket of that
transportation
pie chart.
slice.
Yes, and I believe in this year's budget, they account for probably about 1.5 million of that 2 million number. And then the other 500,000 of that 2 million number is homeless and foster contracted transportation services for students who live outside of our district or live in our district and go outside of our district.
McKenty-Vento.
Yes.
Ms. Puglisi, you answered the question I was just about to ask, so thank you for that. But I do have one other question for transportation. This is the appropriated budget amount. We also have the offsets from a revolving because we do still charge fees for riders.
Yes, correct. And so the salaries for transportation staff are included in the salaries and benefits bucket, and this is the contracted transportation portion. But yes, there is additional transportation costs in our revolving funds. This is just the appropriated. Similarly, for out-of-district tuitions, there is an additional amount of money that is budgeted to come from the circuit breaker revolving fund that is not included in that 4 million six-figure that's up there.
Okay. So maybe at a future F&F meeting, we could have a better picture, like a expanded view of transportation and how much is covered by user fees, if our user fees are in line with what other districts charge, if it's covering a good percentage, or if we should even be charging them at all. I mean, I don't have the right answer, but I think that's one of the areas where that is a revenue source for the district, and I think we need to take a closer look. So maybe, I don't know when that's on your schedule, but I will tune in on BevCam that night.
I think that is less dependent on my schedule as it is on Miss Emma's schedule, based on the fact she's trying to build the whole budget. Right?
Yes.
So, but I'm looking at Miss Erin Brown back there because the three of us kind of make the agenda.
Okay.
So we do have a meeting tomorrow night. Here, let me let you both off the hook. It's not happening tomorrow.
I might watch anyway,
So
but okay.
maybe, so what month are we even in? We're in February, maybe in March, okay?
Okay.
But we usually have a month where we bring in the transportation director, and that is normally towards the end of the year. So it might make sense to do that breakout on the meeting where we have our transportation focus. I'm not sure that'll be early enough for you to be happy relative to this budget discussion. So we can do like rock, paper, scissors, shoot or something.
Okay.
Right.
I just putting it out there in the universe. Thank you. Ms. Robinson, looks like you have a question.
Thank you. Yes. I just feel like I remember Senator Lovely talking about because transportation's gone up so much for everyone, the whole state. Money coming back. Have we heard anything about that?
So that didn't work out as well as she had hoped.
Awesome.
She was hoping that was the conversation around the money that's in circuit breaker. So one of the benefits that happened in the recent change of funding formula for circuit breaker was that they included reimbursement for transportation, which never was included. So we're all very grateful that it was included at all. And the plan has been to roll out that reimbursement at 25% the first year, which was fully funded at the 25%, 50% the next year, which we did get the 50%. It was supposed to be 75% this year. It only came in at 44%. So it was a shortfall for us of about $280,000. And so that was the conversation, I think, and what she was referring to. There are tools in place for us to get reimbursement for that transportation. It just is heavily reliant upon the funding that comes from the state when they come and put the formulas together. So you're right. There are some structures in place to try to help relieve some of that transportation cost, but they haven't all come to full fruition. So that's just a challenge. Okay. All right, so again, this was the wages and benefits. And this is just a scattergram, so we want to kind of paint a picture of our teaching staff. Where are they, so that everyone knows? And you can see that 55%, 56% of our teachers are on step 12. And then according to the column moves, which we talk about steps, this is kind of helpful if you're not familiar with it. When I mentioned steps, steps are when a teacher each year goes from step 2 to step 3 to step 4 to step 5. Every year they step down at the start of the new school year. And then columns move across, and they're based upon education. And so teachers are hired, and then as they garner more postgraduate credits, they are able to utilize them to make column moves, and teachers will move across the column. As you can see, we're fairly evenly distributed. I want to point out Master's 45 is almost not as well distributed because it didn't exist until the new contract. So that's a column that has been just brought in during this contract year. And so now folks will be making their way. Used to be that you had to go from Master's 30 to Master's 60. And so we reopened and reinstated that Master's 45 as part of the last contract negotiation. So that's the distribution this year. And we anticipate the distribution to be similar in the columns, although there'll be some column movement across. But you can see that 60% of our teachers will be at step 12 at that point, and then the remainder are hired up here in the other steps as they go along. So that's just some information. Oh, and I also want to point out this Schedule B and C. These are our COTAs and our SLPAs and our LPNs. Right, and so that schedule exists in FY25, but in FY26, as part of the contract negotiations, they have been incorporated into this salary schedule, so they'll no longer be broken out separately. So they had, part of the agreement was placement for them on the salary scale. So then the second area that we look at is enrollments, and this is a historical look at our enrollments. I'm going to have to cut a couple of years off because we're running out of space on our slides. Actually, I won't be doing that. Someone else will be doing that, so I'll leave that to Emma next year. However, these are the anticipated enrollments for FY26. As you can see, we are continue to be steady enrollment across the district. Sometimes we fluctuate. I mentioned earlier that a very large fourth grade class was going to fifth grade. And so, sometimes by level they vary, but our enrollments are relatively steady. And that is a very good thing for Beverly. There are a number of communities around us who are grappling with declining enrollments, and that's very challenging for them. So we don't have that particular concern, and so that's fortunate for us. I also, when I do this, I look to, sort of how are these class sizes holding up. As you can see that we have relatively steady enrollments from year to year. We just roll them down. And so we anticipate to have close to 2,000 elementary students next year. I estimated the kindergarten at 360. That has been kind of our average across the years, but it does fluctuate. So last year we had estimated 360, we had 369, the year before 345. We were as low as 332. This is largely dependent on birth rates in Beverly and who was born 5 years ago and who will be 5 on or before August 31st. So we estimate our placeholder at 360, and we usually are relatively close to that. As likewise, we're looking at just a 130 number for preschool. We start the year off usually lighter in preschool, and then sometimes kids age in out of EI or out of other areas. And so it's a fairly safe number for us to start, at least in anticipating our classes for next year. I keep looking back at Bethany because she's shaking her head at me. So this is elementary enrollments. This is middle school enrollments, and here's what I would like to point out. There's sort of the 2 large cohort classes in a row that have risen from 4th to 5th, so that our numbers at the middle school are up. So from 1387 to 1444 anticipated next year. Again, you can see the fluctuation sometimes in cohorts. Last year we had 371 fifth graders. We anticipate having 379 fifth graders next year. So that's where, as I go through the process in the next 4 weeks, we're going to be looking at resource allocation, whether there'll be additions or, people moving. I know that you've seen me with the sheets before where a third grade class goes to fourth grade, or a second grade class goes to third grade. We also need to look at what happens when a larger class goes to the middle school. So we'll be making and looking at that. If you remember last year, we added some fifth grade teachers to accommodate that. And so we'll be looking at what that looks like for next year. And then here's the opposite happening in the high school. So we just had a very small 8th grade class. It was one of those smaller cohorts. And then in addition, we have been realizing about 50 to 60 students going to Essex Tech each year. So we have a very low freshman class heading up to the high school next year. We had a lower class last year, but we have an even lower class this year. So again, we'll be looking at resource allocation. We'll be looking at how, we structure schedules for kids and all of that. So we have tuition outs of 72. That we have some special ed increases that we'll be indicating to you, some anticipated out-of-district placements. We had 67 last year. I know for us this looks like, the 70, 60, that's like the normal number. I would like to remind everyone, if you remember, that in FY19 we had 110 kids out of district. So this is we've done a really good job. However, we need to meet the needs of students who sit in front of us, and sometimes that need is a different placement than we have in our district. So, and then homeschool numbers are relatively stable, except for back when it was COVID and we had a really high number. But our homeschool, Julie Smith is our homeschool coordinator for the district, and she and Donna Bergeron work together around that. And that is a pretty stable thing that's going on right now.
Question.
Go ahead, Ms. Visnick.
Thanks. Way back in the time machine, before you were superintendent, the 288, the last class that was below 300. We were, planning. We were planning this building. We had just come out of the high school planning, and I think that I have a distinct recollection of working with Dr. Hershey around tapping into, these letters might be wrong, like NEASC or some such, to try to get, you mentioned it earlier, what is our projection of our birth rates?
NESDEC does
Was I
that.
close?
You were. NESDEC, NESDEC.
Okay. Yeah, whatever. To really try to look further out, the trends around, might we ever go back to a class size below 300? And I just want to go on record as saying that would be my favorite Visnick child, Bryce Theodore, was that graduating class. The last time we were under 300.
We were under 324 and 25.
Yeah.
Were we just coming out of COVID?
No, so the 342, I'll tell you what that was. Do you remember when we were opening the middle school and there were almost 400 that's
Yeah.
that year. That's
that year?
matches up with the 7th and 8th, one of the large classes that we had there. But the 287, I will tell you where the 280s are coming from. For the most part, the Essex Tech, we used to have 30 students in each grade level going at a time, and we now have 60. So some of that reduction in our classes is due to that, and the smaller cohorts. The 321 that we have was also one of those large classes, I believe.
Right. So the question really is, do we, can we work with that group, whatever their letters are,
Yeah.
or is there any benefit for us to look at that again?
It's a
We were
good-
looking at it to try to figure out how big to build a building.
So here's the dilemma. If you look at our elementary, 360 is the very good average of our cohorts. It's the new norm. We used to have a lower, when I first was superintendent, it was 330 to 340. The 360s started in and they haven't stopped. And I think a lot, So I'm confident that we're pretty close, knowing that we're going to have 360s through the elementary. The unpredictability of high school is, what impact does the tech have on some of those students? And are there any other, there's St. John's Prep, there's Austin Prep, there's, some other, Pingree, so that we do have some students who leave in 8th grade to go either to a private school or something like that. So, and we sometimes get them in from the Saints, and so it's hard to predict. But in terms of what NASDAQ will do, will go on birth rates, and they won't help us with anything more. But we do use them anyway. We got new numbers from them last year, or 2 years ago, I think. And so we do every few years go back to them and ask them for another look at that.
Okay, cool, thanks.
I have a question about our enrollments. Do we include any of our students that elect to do an online high school kind of program in our numbers? No.
They're not in these numbers.
They're not in these numbers.
Those will be listed in a separate place. So
Okay.
here's the tricky thing of enrollments. If you try to go onto the DESE website and look at enrollments, depending on which page you look at, sometimes they include school choice students, sometimes they don't include, sometimes they include charter school students, and sometimes they don't. Sometimes they're reporting on students who live in Beverly who attend school. So it's really tricky to look through those pages and determine what it is. These numbers that I have are based on kids that sit in chairs in our building.
Okay,
So
thanks.
this is a physical count of the students that attend the Beverly Public Schools,
Okay, thank
if
you.
that helps. Yeah. Rachel?
Ms. Robinson, sorry.
Thank you. Do we ever do a exit survey of people who are leaving the district, or is that just too?
I don't know. I mean, I don't believe that it's as a normal course of action that we have done that. I know we talk to homeschool parents when they choose to homeschool. But, we don't have, 90% of the people that leave our district move, right? And so it's a matter of, I've moved to Lynn, I've moved to Salem, I've moved to Danvers, I've moved out of state. We don't really have a lot of people leaving for other reasons. I do think it's an interesting thing to wonder about if you're wondering about kids who school choice out. I think that would be, an interesting survey to conduct, to say, why did you choose to do that? I mean, I can tell you from personal knowledge, I know someone who works in Rockport. She school choices her children to go to school in Rockport with her. That's the choice that she made because that's where she works, and it's just easier for her. But that would be an interesting discussion. So we don't have, I think at Saints, the Saints enrollments, they don't fluctuate that much. We have an occasional family that will move to Saints, or not, but.
I thought of one more question. When you talked about school choice, we currently have a robust amount of people that school choice into our district. So those are kids that sit in our seats.
They're included in these numbers.
And if we were to change those numbers when we vote on that soon, right? Isn't that something we have to do
Yep.
soon?
You may hear me talk about that a little bit in the next time
so
we
it
talk
could
about it.
fluctuate up or down.
Right. So for example, I think when we're very steady at the 360 numbers, I think it's good to know that that's where we are. So that if we see a low cohort, all of a sudden, a grade level that maybe only has 335 instead of 360, we know that those are seats that are open that aren't going to cause us to add any resourcing. They're students that are going to be able to fit into classrooms that we already have. But we also would not want to go overboard if, like in 5th and 6th grade, I don't think we want to increase the number of school choice students that we have in a grade level when we're really full.
Ms. Visnick, and then I have a follow-up, but go ahead.
Is that particular chart, which I also really appreciate, coming forward tonight or not until the night that we vote?
So typically we don't do that till May, but Donna and I have been talking about having that come. That's a Donna chart and the school choice numbers. And so when and if we have a conversation about school choice, that chart will be part of the
Because if
data.
I recall correctly, it somewhat goes to enrollment, because if all of our seats are already filled, then we know these numbers are solid. If that 335, if next year's 7th graders has, I'm going to make up a number,
Openings,
3 openings.
Correct.
Then that number could go to 338.
correct.
But as I recall, we have 10 or 15 seats at each grade level, and they're pretty much all taken
They're
right
pretty
now.
much all taken. We have waiting lists of 8 or 9 people for most grade levels. So we'll give you a little preview. We've been talking a lot about school choice as a revenue. It's because it is a revenue, right? And you only want to do it if you have seats. You don't want to do it if it's going to stress the resources that and require you to get more resources. But for example, at the high school, with low numbers like that, we have room, and so we only have 15 that we offer. You may vote to increase that to 20. That's a decision or a choice that you could make. We have a waiting list right now for those seats, so we think we would fill some. However, Emma has been very cautious to tell me that even if we were counting on $200,000 with whatever number of seats that is, 40 seats or whatever, that we would want to only budget it in at 70%, because we're not full, because at some point people leave or change or whatever. But that's something that we have talked about bringing forward as part of a budget discussion as one of the ways to think about revenue. But we didn't come prepared for that tonight with our numbers or anything like that.
To follow on this choice, I'm sorry, I'm thinking about revenues tonight. You'll see a theme. The state
We're always thinking about revenues.
sets that amount, and is it still $5,000 plus the moderate amount if there's some sort of services involved with the student, but it's also outbound the same amount? Okay, so as long as we have more students coming in, we're increasing our revenues.
Yep.
Okay. Ms. Wisnick, do you have another question?
Well, my question actually for you, when you started your question, do you thinking you want to lower the numbers in the lower grades to make our lower grades be smaller?
So I don't think that's an option for us because we've already filled them. And
Well, I was going to say is we can only lower at kindergarten,
Right.
and then say as it shuffles through each
Correct.
year, look at kindergarten again.
Because remember, they're already here. So we have 10 seats from K to 8, and for the most part, we have 10 kids, and they get to stay. They are guaranteed a spot in the Beverly Public Schools through graduation. So
Right,
you
that's
can't
why I
really
was
lower
trying
your
to
numbers.
Ask her that question.
Yeah.
Was that your point though?
I don't know. I'm exploring all options
Yeah.
and thinking outside of the box this year.
All right.
Yeah.
So I wasn't really anticipating that we would dig into that, but we have done a lot of conversation about that. It's one of the things that we're thinking about. So you'll hear more about that, and maybe we'll add that to the March budget discussion when we come back. This is the famous yellow sheet. I have them here for you. Can you talk? Pass these out? I want to preface this with this is not the final yellow sheet. I call this the yellow sheet. It's one of Lorinda's favorite little charts that we make. This is all we have done is roll kids. We have not made decisions around staffing based upon it, but with the current staff that we have in place, you'll see these are the numbers of students. And this just helps you see how many of those 369 kids are sitting at what particular school. I know. I can't. We're not using that one. Use your paper in front of you because this is a screenshot. It's really hard to see. I don't think I can make it bigger. Let me see if I can.
It's not much better on the paper.
I know.
We should maybe spring for the 17-inch piece of paper for this particular chart. And
We
put
will bring it
on.
forward. When it's the final copy, we will bring it forward. But this, I wanted just for you to all begin to see what numbers of kids are sitting in what grade levels. Huh? I don't know, it's just a sample copy. It's not the final copy. So this is really how we determine how many kids are in each building, what the cohort sizes are at each class, what that would look like, and it's just built right now on the current staffing that we have in place in our schools. So taking a look at this, these numbers will shift and change. We have classes that are on watch, classes that are either under-enrolled or over or close. I just want to remind you that we have set targets as a school committee for class size. Those targets that you have set are K to 2, 22 students in a classroom. You'll see that in this list I've tried to cap the kindergartens at 20. We try that every year, and sometimes we're able to do that and sometimes we're not. It depends on the enrollments that we get. From 3 to 4, the class size is 25. From 5 to 8, the class size is 25. And from 9 to 12, the class size is 30. These are targets. I will also remind you that you have guidelines that you have set years ago that are higher than this, but you have asked me over the last few years to target these numbers for class size. So these are the targets that I use.
Mayor Cahill.
Thanks, Madam President. Just for clarity, Dr. Trocheck, when you say targets, the numbers that show there are the upper end numbers.
Very top.
The target is not to
Correct.
go above it.
And when we get close to the target, we start to do a watch and decide, is that the right decision for that class? So we do not have 25s. We have a couple classes at 24 and 23 in grades 3 and 4 across the district, but we do not have classes, with the exception of a phys ed class at the middle school. A STEM class might have a couple over in the global apps at the middle school, but for the most part, the class sizes are 23, 24, with the exception of like a band or a chorus or phys ed. I think the classes get a little bigger. And at the high school, the average class size at the high school runs somewhere around 23, 24, but we have some classes that are at 27 or 28 at the high school level. But we don't have any that are exceeding 30. Some of our classes at the high school are capped at 24, for example, culinary, because there's only 24 stations that you can work at. Our lab sciences are capped at the number of lab stations that we have in the classroom, so.
Would it be a fair assessment to say at our high school, due to our schedule and just the demand for classes that particular kids want to take, that sometimes we have classes that are actually really far under the target?
Well, I think the far under the target comes from some of the smaller class sizes that have been going up. We're working to correct some of that. I mean,
Okay.
we don't run classes under 15. I think, with the exception of maybe a 12 or a 13 if it's an AP class or a, something like that. But the goal is that 15 is sort of the lower limit of running classes. And we're looking very closely at those enrollments because, sometimes it's scheduling. It gets really tricky. Students want to take an AP section that only runs at a certain time. And so, but Julie Ferrara is amazing with the schedule, and she and Mark are working really hard on that scheduling this year too. So
Okay,
they do work to kind of work those numbers around.
good to hear.
Yeah. All right. And then I wanted to include this largely because Caitlin came before the F&F group at the beginning of the year, just so that you understand sort of the makeup of some of our student body. We started this year with 211 Ls. Ls are our multilingual learners. By October Sims reporting, we had 258 Ls. We peaked at 284 Ls. However, in the last 5 weeks, we've seen some declining enrollment among our Ls as a lot of our families are returning back to their native countries. So we are watching and monitoring our multilingual enrollments really closely so that we have the right resourcing in place for them as they need it throughout. If you remember, we did add a couple of L positions in last year's budget, and it was a good thing that we did, given the numbers that we saw as enrollments came in. So these are, Caitlin is amazing and does a great job of monitoring. I think it's interesting to look at the makeup. Sometimes the number of newcomers is more. They require more service delivery than if an L is in a level 3 or a level 4. So, but we've had 12 newcomers. And then 5 others that are in their second or third year. We're seeing a lot of movement around the state. We're seeing a lot of movement within the state. And so this has been a population of students that we want to make sure we have the resources in place for. And so that's something that we've been tracking really closely. This is a graphic, which even looks more dramatic than what the numbers look like. This is the L population changes since 2020 in Beverly. So it's important for us to note that this is a population of students that we are, dedicated to serving, and the resources are required to kind of make sure that we're able to do that.
Could you reaffirm my understanding that at one point Ayers was a
Oh, yeah.
EL school, and then we really made an effort to have students in their home neighborhood schools next to their friends and neighbors? Okay.
I believe it
How's
was
that working?
2015.
Yeah.
Up until 2014, I was the principal at Ayers, so I can tell you that I know that we had the program in Beverly for multilingual learners was only located at the Ayers School for Elementary. So every student who came in who was screened and required English learner services joined the Ayers population, and we had the Ayers community was where they all went. In 2015, the numbers had grown. So we were at about 75 or 80 students, and really part of the conversation that Caitlin and I were having at the time is that students belong in their home neighborhoods. And so we wanted to try to figure out how we would do that. So that year, we set up a redistribution of students so that they all went back to their home schools, and English learner teachers were hired in each one of the elementary schools. And then from there, they've all settled in, and now doesn't matter, whatever your home school is where you go, and English services are available for students at every one of our buildings.
Okay,
So,
thanks. I
yeah.
just wanted to reaffirm my understanding.
Yeah.
Are there other questions?
Okay, so now here comes the other special sauce. These are all the anticipated increases that I mentioned at the beginning. And so I'm going to walk through some of them. We're happy to answer questions as we go. We know that our out-of-district tuition budgets are going to go up by $600,000. Those are known increases. They are, OSD has increased 3.67%. If you remember, and we're still reeling our, I hate the word deficit, our depressed carryover in circuit breaker is largely due to that 14% increase that we got 2 years ago. It's what caused us to keep digging deeper and deeper into that revolving account. The consortium rate increases this year are estimated at 10%. We have some known reconstruction increases. Those are for some private schools that, if you need more information, we're going to let Bethany talk about, because I'm not, or Emma probably knows that too. And then also some known, we know there are some placements. We have a couple of students who we have been awaiting placements for almost 2 years to get accepted into programs. So we know that we need to find placements for them, and they are not out of district yet. So those would be increases to our budget. Contracted service transportation, again, that was the conversation that we started earlier. These are out-of-district special education and homeless students. We're just assuming a 3% increase. That is conservative? Is that a good word? I remember we talked about conservative. I don't know. But we're assuming a 3% increase for for those services at $250,000. We also have a particular challenge, and again, this is the same conversation as the revolving accounts that we've been having. The 240 is a federal grant. I'm just going to repeat, a federal grant. I know that FNF is talking tomorrow about federal grants. We are all very concerned about, any of the reliance that we currently have on federal grants, not knowing what could happen. We know that there's a lot of decisions being made at the federal level that might impact funding for schools. In addition, the 240 grant, which is also known as the IDEA grant, so that might help people better understand what that money is targeted for, is a 27-month grant, and there is a carry forward that you can use. However, this year, we utilize in Beverly that for our paraprofessional salaries. So in Beverly, we had 40 paras who we have carried on the 240 grant with contractual increases to paraprofessionals, and with the absorbed health insurance costs that we also moved on to the grant, where we have utilized that carry forward fully. And so we don't have a carry forward coming, which means that we have to look to the appropriated budget to absorb some of that carry forward cost that we normally have. We also utilize $147,000 of it for the co-teaching, which is a Teach Sixth. We have special education teachers who teach a sixth section, and that's contractually obligated stipends for them. So that's what that money is. We anticipate having to find a way to absorb that $547,000. Did I say that right? I was worried about that one.
For our Teach Six, I know that we also relied on revenues from our exchange students that came, and I have heard anecdotally that we have some students that are still coming, but I wonder what control we have over the number of students that elect to come to Beverly.
Or the fee we charge. Go get them.
Yeah.
So yes, we have supported some of our co-teaching Teach Six from our non-resident tuition revolving fund. Those have largely been the non-special education Teach Six. So if there were other classes that required co-teaching at the high school, generally a smaller number of our classes. We have historically offered about 18 open seats, open through SEVIS, and we have a current enrollment of about 10 students. We had 6 students, I believe, that have been here all year, and then 4 or 5 who elect to come for 1 semester. We did recently increase our non-resident tuition fee. So it had been last set, I believe, 2 or 3 years ago, and it was tied to the FY21 per pupil expenditure rate. We have made significant investments in the Beverly Public Schools since then, increasing our per pupil expenditure rate. And so it only felt fitting to subsequently increase the tuition cost. And so we did work with the SEVIS organization to raise that fee for the upcoming school year, set at what our expected per pupil, when Desi is done with their math, number, which we expect to be around $21,150. So that was what that fee was set at. We have not heard that there is any sort of anticipated change in eligibility. We have had students already who have have selected Beverly for next year that are working with the SEVIS agency.
And I'm going to follow up, and then I saw your hand, then your hand. And this relies on students securing housing within the town of or city of Beverly.
Yes, and so I believe they work with the organization. I believe the organization also provides a stipend to those host families. Yes.
Okay. And so Ms. Robinson, then Dr. Silva.
So I just wanted to be sure, so the cost, a student coming in would cost $21,100, and that's going to go up.
So that is the increase. So it,
that is the
right, and so that's
It was
tied.
16.
It was 16,000, maybe 800 and change. It was the FY21 per pupil rate, and again,
Wow.
my calculation based on Desi's formula that I anticipate that they will corroborate when they're done doing the math and auditing everybody's end of year reports, brings it in at that much.
That's just something I never knew about. That's very interesting.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah, so we've had a couple of good conversations about per pupil expenditure at FNF, and we have seen significant investment in Beverly Public Schools, and not just through our appropriated funds, but through our federal grants, through our revolving funds, and it really captures all of the money spent on behalf of Beverly Public Schools. And so there's a very exciting graph coming your way
Yes.
in a few slides that sort of captures a holistic look at just where all of the funding for Beverly comes from, right? So, I mean, $78 million in our appropriated budget is absolutely a sizable sum of money, but it is only a piece of the whole picture. There's additional funds from the city that are in support of things like retiree health benefits, school debt payments, other things like that that are also part of the comprehensive funding of the public schools.
Dr. Silva.
So
Mike.
I'm curious, you mentioned 2015, the EL, the
Redistribution.
so
That's what we call it.
Can
We
you
didn't know what to call it.
estimate what the cost was to go from that 2015 policy to?
So the
redistribution?
only way I can estimate is the salaries.
ballpark.
So we had 3 English learner teachers at Ayers serving the program, and we switched to having 5 English learners across the elementary school. So the increased cost at that time would have been 2 salaries, which I would estimate at about $130,000.
And transportation, minimal transportation?
We eliminated transportation because the transportation was
Yeah,
all going
okay,
to Ayers.
yeah.
So they were now at their home schools. They just were all part of regular transportation.
All right, thank you.
Yeah. All right. These are the other anticipated increases. Again, some of these are approximations, but in buildings and grounds, we know that we are looking at our contractual services on HVAC. We know that we have already exceeded our spending levels by $125,000, and we know that there'll be increased supply costs. So we anticipate building into the budget $142,000 to cover those HVAC contractual service costs to our district. In technology, this is not also, I want to remind you all, rewind to last year, we had conversations around technology. At the time, there were a couple things that happened. Technology was the one area that we did rely on ESSER. It was there. They were one-time expenses. We were able to use it for that. However, we built in an increase last year in the budget, knowing that we were kind of over, we needed to figure out ways to build them back in. And then we got an unexpected federal grant for emergency connectivity fund that was $300,000, which was wonderful, except for that, and we used it for exactly what we needed to use it for. However, our cycle of replacement for devices is something that we've been working really hard to sustain. We know that next year we have laptop replacement cycle due for a cost of $200,000 that was not in this budget, so that would be an increased cost that we'd have to add. And we are currently replacing iPads at the first grade level on a 4-year cycle. That cost is $150. These are both costs that we're looking at, if there's flexibility or not. But however, I want to really caution that we don't want to get to a point where we were 8 years ago, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, when all of our devices were old at the same time. And so, this is something that is on our radar. We know we need to do. We'll figure out where and when. We do have one opportunity of an E-rate coming forward that might alleviate some of the pressure on this. Again, I'm just putting out for you what the anticipated increases are, so you're all aware.
Okay,
Dr. Silva, did you have a?
Dr. Silva and then
sorry.
Dr. McKenzie.
I'm curious, are there offsets based on fees associated with?
No, these do not include the laptops for students. This is not the laptop programs for students. This is for teachers.
This is for teachers?
Yeah.
Dr. McKenzie DeFranza.
Yeah, thank you for this update. I'm wondering, because of the cyclical nature of these expenses, were we not anticipating it because of the source of funding? So for example, I understand the one-time offset, and I'll come back to what that is because I'm not sure what an emergency connectivity fund is. But in terms of the technology, I'm thinking that when we first lease them, there's a window of time.
These are not leases.
These are not leases. These are purchases
for staff.
Okay.
And so, yes, we were anticipating them. However, we had the funding from ESSER, and, we talked about that. I think I mentioned that last year. That was the one area that we utilized ESSER that was in what would be one time but are actually recurring. And so one of the things, and so we built in 150,000, or the attempt was to build in 150, knowing that we had to build in another 250 over the next couple of years. So we've known we had a budget that was not sustaining our sustainability for devices, and we were incrementally, if you look back over the last few budgets, we increased by 100, we increased by 150, trying to offset this $600,000 or $700,000 cost that we have on a recurring basis for devices. And it really is a matter of making sure that we keep the devices working, and they get slow, they get old, they, whatever. But so
sorry. So the part of the question I'm also thinking about is because of the cycle of these devices. I guess I'm wondering when the determination is made, because they come to a point where they're also not worth trading in. Do we trade back in? Do we kind of cut it off at a certain point so that there's a credit? And even with that, are we still having this dollar amount?
That, I don't know if that is that factored in already? The
That is
trade-in?
not
We did not.
factored in these figures. In conversations with Steve Palomo, there is a lot of variability in what we see in trade-in value. And that rate, it's largely dependent on the quality of the device when we get it back, which we don't necessarily know at this point in time.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yep, I saw Mayor Cahill and then Dr. Silva again.
Dr. Trochik, if you could help me with the second, that we're on the technology one.
Yep.
What is not expected to recur on that first line?
Getting the $300,000 from the Emergency Connectivity Fund.
All right, so.
That was money that we got in, we were
No, I
fortunate
hear
to
you.
get
It
it,
just-
but
we
we will
usually-
not be getting that again. And so we used it as an offset, and so we don't have it as an offset this year.
Right. The word confused me, because
Yes, I know.
usually we use it to refer to things
Yeah.
that
And I
are
will say,
repeating recurring
we got
costs.
that 2 or 3 years in a row, so that was one
So-
of the reasons why it sort of got there. And that was part of the ARPA ESSER money that was coming for COVID relief. It was part of the COVID relief fund sources that were coming. And we're not expecting that to be coming, or any federal
So
relief on that.
so we got the 300K in FY '25, but
Yep.
we won't get it in '26.
Correct.
So I'm adding it up and it's not adding up, is all.
Oh, it says 650 instead. You're right.
Should
You're
be
adding to
650?
650
Oh,
instead of, yeah.
yeah.
Okay, as long as,
Yes.
Yeah.
but that's
We
the
like
number, that's the number
550.
you've
I
been
like
working
We
on.
like 550 better.
Yes.
But it's not surprising. It's the number you've been working
Yeah.
with, right?
Yeah.
650, gotcha.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
And then the last section here is software and licensing. The good news is we made corrections last year, and we have worked really hard, Dot and Alan Faulkner, and have worked super hard at a cycle of licensure renewal so that we have spread them out over 4 years, 3 years.
It may take one more, and then we'll have each of the core subjects in a year.
In a
So
year.
when
So
you're
we've been,
doing math-
so for example, we don't want Lexia and ST Math and our Zern licenses to all expire in the same year. So we have sort of set them up in a rotation so that we know what to budget for those for licenses in any given year. However, what we did not have as a cost last year, when we had our new security system 6 years ago installed, the licensing came with it for 6 years, and now we have to pick up that license ourselves, and that's $100,000. So
Is
that,
that an annual?
that's an annual, yeah, that's annually to maintain all of the security systems that we have for all 8 of our buildings. And then the wireless contract renewal is another one that we're picking up, although that's the one that might have the E-rate. So that cost, while it's up there right now, there might be an E-rate return that might lessen the blow on that one there. But we know that we have to renew our wireless contract, and if we do a 3-year term, it's a lot less expensive than if we do a 1-year term. So that's a new added license that we didn't have budgeted in FY '25.
Okay, I
So-
think Dr. Silva still had a question, then Dr. McKenzie and I had a question as well.
So I'm curious, what's the average lifetime of a computer for a teacher?
For the teacher computers, we have them on a 5-year cycle, 4 to 5. They were on a 4-year, we pushed it to a 5-year, so they're on a 5-year cycle right now.
5-year cycle? And do you anticipate that any, like, the computers that you take in, are any of them do you think some of them could be refurbished and give you a pool of like 100
So
computers?
Steve determines that, and he puts them into loaners so student use of loaners. We have some loaners that we keep, or he turns them in and we get money back. The question is whether we'll stretch it out to a 6-year instead of a 5-year, or if we can find the 200,000. I mean, that's really the change. Steve does not, we did this, we already went from 4 to 5 years, and the challenge is that if they start to break down, it's going to interrupt instruction, and that, we don't want that.
4 years, 4 or 5 years isn't that old for a computer.
Well, for the way that they're using them and the, devices and.
I'm pretty harsh on my computer as well, so I've got to.
So I just say, that's our cycle of renewal, that's a cycle that we look for. And again, that's the area. I will also say that we forewent the renewal of the replacement of iPads last year, and we've stopped having a one-to-one environment for our kindergartners. That was somewhat of a decision that we made educationally. We did not really want them on iPads, and we didn't feel like, so each classroom now has a classroom set for a station if they're doing Lexia or ST Math or something, but each child does not have their own individual iPad in kindergarten. The conversation is whether we do that again in first grade, but that still isn't going to help us because we're going to eventually run into a place where the iPads are old. And those sometimes cycle from, they go through to K to 4, so they're 5 years, and the ones we took last year is we put them back down into first grade. So they're,
Do you think you'll be in a position to stagger it, or does it always happen in a?
well, we always, the plan is to always replace first grade and always replace fifth grade, because then the fifth graders get a set of iPads that go from 5th to 8th. And then we take the 8th grade iPads and either trade them in or cycle them back down to be the classroom sets for K and 1. So that's that's what we've been doing with them.
Okay, Dr. McKenzie?
Thanks. I'm sorry that I still have a question from the first one before I have this other question. I still don't know what the emergency connectivity
So
fund
the
is.
ECF was a one-time offering that they had 3 rounds.
No,
And-
what is it? I don't know what it
Over.
is. I don't even know what it is, though.
Oh, it's money. that comes from the federal government. And so they called it the emergency, it was relief money that came through the federal government during
Okay.
COVID. And so there was around.
To make sure that schools had.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought this was a fund that like exists and we pay
No,
into it
no,
or
this
something.
was emergency funding for,
Just that
specific
time.
for that, and we got money in all 3 rounds, which was wonderful, but kind of tipped the budget off a little bit, that's all.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay,
Yeah.
sorry. So then I have just a question about students leasing the devices. How does that offset the cost to the district? Because typically, at least at the high school anyway,
They're not included in our budget at all, that's a separate, we keep that in a separate, we don't, that's a separate self-sustaining fund. Am I right?
Yes.
Okay.
so these numbers are to purchase the device
For staff,
for staff only?
yes.
Because I heard us talking about first grade.
The iPads, K to
iPads.
8, are district-owned, but the laptops at the high school are leased, and that lease program is entirely separate and self-sustaining.
Okay, so that's outside of this budget?
Correct.
That's not, okay, great, thanks.
I had questions about the wireless contract and whether that is within our physical buildings or if this is the hotspots that we had distributed to make sure kids had connectivity at home.
It's within our building.
Within our physical buildings.
Within our physical buildings, okay. My next question is, you answered for kindergarten already, but for the elementary, from first grade to fourth grade, there's essentially a laptop or a device for each.
One-to-one.
One-to-one device. Are any of the elementary children bringing devices home,
Not as a regular course.
not as a
I
regular?
don't believe, that's a, no, I don't believe.
And then for the.
I mean, if we were to be able to have a digital snow day or something, they could, but they have not since probably 2022
Not on
brought
a
any of the
regular
devices
basis.
home.
If we have a student that needs it or
Yeah.
has a specific reason, then that's a school decision.
A school-based decision, a student-based, okay. And then for our middle schoolers, I know that, during COVID times, everyone was bringing their devices home, but I wondered now for the 5th and 6th graders, if they are carrying around their devices throughout the school day, are they bringing them home? Do they have homework assignments or additional supplemental opportunities on them?
So I'm going to delay that and let Lisa answer that question.
Okay.
It's my belief that they do bring them home and that and I know that there was discussion about limiting the traveling around the buildings with them because we're limiting at,
Not 5 and 6. Not 5 and 6.
Not 5 and 6. They don't take them home. 7 and 8 take them home. Dot, I didn't,
Okay.
Lisa Dot told me that.
I
All right,
vaguely
but they- and
remember
the
that
travel.
change.
We also are trying to limit the travel around the building, so they only bring them to the places where they need them around the building.
Okay. And I guess my final answer or final question is, how much of our core curriculum nowadays is based on, I know we used to use ST Math and, there's Duolingo and different types of apps like that. Are we reliant on students having internet connection at home, having a device available at the times like win time or whenever it is that they're trying to accomplish their assigned work or their supplemental work?
I'm going to let Dr. Clarity.
That's at elementary?
No, middle, I think she's.
Well, elementary, but I'm thinking more like the 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, like how much?
As we're updating curriculum, as in the last few years, you've seen through CISL that most of what we have has a online component to it. So our Reveal Math program, it's online, so they need access to their computers. There is work and manipulatives and stuff like that they still need, but they need access to their computers. The ELA program that we adopted has, almost with everything now, has an online component to it, but they're also got the real books in their hands. So it's definitely a hybrid approach.
And so if a student misses a class or misses an assignment, they would need a device and a connection to be able to make up
Yeah,
work.
everything's in Google Classroom or Seesaw.
Okay. And so for the hotspots at home, is that all handled now through Comcast and individual families?
We have a great program we have a number of hotspots that we were able to procure through originally when ESSER funding came out and some grant money was available. So we have hotspots available for families. I have not heard, at one point, they asked us to increase the number of hotspots. We did that. I have not heard that we don't have enough available for any families that want to use them. And I don't know, one way was the Comcast internet program, helping families get on that, but we also have Verizon, AT&T,
T-Mobile, yeah.
T-Mobile, somebody's hotspots available as well.
Okay.
For families if they need them.
I don't want to monopolize. I see your hand. One more thought before I lose it. I think Dr. Silva had, offered that perhaps devices last longer, and I think with the advent of solid-state drives and so much more is happening in the cloud and over the internet, some devices, even with abuse, maybe they're designed to be more rugged for people that spill coffee and whatnot. I think my experience in industry is that our laptops are lasting 7, 8, 9 years now, and
So-
it's a testament to the
Yeah.
new engineering and the fact that not much is being done here. It's all happening in
And
the
I
cloud.
think it would be interesting to have Steve come and share. I will share what he shared with me, that we purchased laptops in 2020 with some of the ARPA money, and the next year there was a newer drive that came out, wishing that we were on the newer system, that the newer ones will last longer, but the question is how, and again, we monitor them. One of the good things that we have is a really strong Jamf, whatever that thing is, but
management
he
system.
has a really good management system to know what the battery capacities are and things, and he monitors and manages that well. So this is that's one of the things that we're going to keep monitoring and make decisions on.
I
But-
say, the battery is the one thing that they
Yeah.
always have to replace. I saw Ms. Coelho, your hand?
A couple different things. Well, with the fifth graders, a couple different things. With the fifth graders, I know my fifth grader, he's only brought his iPad home maybe 5 times so far this school year, and it was to practice one of his classes. Other than
So
that,
I
he
think
really
it's
hasn't
limited,
brought
but,
home,
and I think
yeah.
on an individual basis, some kids may, but for the most part, they're not going home.
Yeah, so it's very rare. It's not that often. But, and the other one was for Dr. Trocheck. So have we tested how long we can keep one of the iPads and it still works functional? Because I've had this
Yeah.
one since
I
I started.
I will
and
tell you,
it still works pretty good.
and I'm happy to bring Steve to you, but he is as on top of the technology scene as anyone that I've ever known, and he is.
In 6 years, 3
and
months
he
with
was-
this bad boy,
I
it's
know.
still good.
And so, again, the question is what we're doing with them and what access we need. So that was why kindergarten was considered one that, I don't really think when they need them, they just need to do the 2 apps that they do. And we're having that discussion with elementary principals about first graders as well, right? We all went to one-to-one because we needed it. We hope there'll not be another pandemic where we would need to be in a one-to-one environment. That really was how we got there. It was, I don't think, never the intent that a first grader or a kindergartner would have a device that they used all day long. But it is a transition because, as Dr. Flaherty mentioned, our ZERN program, there are some things that they access on them. So I hear all of your questions about it. We watch and monitor, and really Steve is up to date, I think, on what works and what doesn't, and happy to continue. I press him the same way you're pressing me, so I get it. You should have been in the room the other day. We were saying the exact same thing. What do you mean they can't last another year? So it's not without consideration that we're thinking about those things.
One of the other things that Steve had shared with me relative to device replacement is making sure that the devices are new enough that they are compatible with MCAS in the grades where the students are taking MCAS, and that is a consideration as well. And that seemingly, seemingly older devices in the grades where the students are taking MCAS may not be compatible, depending on some of the functionality that they build into keeping MCAS secure.
Thank you. Ms. Visnick, did I see one more question?
I just wanted to, actually, I was going to say something similar to what Ms. Emma said, and the fact that at the end of the day, we already don't have as much money as Dr. Trocheck has already presented as anticipated increases. So, we can sit here and haggle over this particular, 250,000 or 500, 650,000, if we do the correct math, piece of technology. This board may have to say, no, we're not spending that money, and kick this can down the road, and then we'll have to deal with the consequences of that if in fact we run into something like now the software isn't compatible with the model of the machines because we couldn't afford to buy newer machines. So I just want to make that very clear. We can sit here all we want and say we have old machines and they should last longer. There are software compatibility issues, says the software nerd, and there are budgetary constraints. So can we go to the next slide?
Well, yeah, first of all, I just want to say I appreciate the conversation and discussion. That was our goal. We wanted to make sure that you are all knowing what we were looking at. I mean, we're building a budget and we're making decisions, and decisions haven't been made, but it's really important, I feel, for you and for the public to know sort of what it looks like and what the landscape looks like. So here's more other anticipated increases. Utilities, so again, we're watching our utilities, and I understand, I'm not going to even attempt to try to describe it all, but it has to do with buying solar credits and not buying solar credits and applying them in certain places and what our utility costs are. And so that's something that Emma has taken on and is really researching and figuring out for us, and we'll have more information for that as we go, as we need it.
And we have some more conversation coming for FNF tomorrow, but largely looking back at our historic sort of year-to-date spend as a percentage of total annual spend, and then comparing that sort of metric to where we are this year, we are seeing ourselves, as we have seen in past years, but a little bit more so this year, sort of behind where we've budgeted, both for our electric, but also for our heating and gas costs. So the same way that folks on your residential bill, utility bills are likely seeing increased supply and and delivery fees, we are seeing those on our side as well. So even though we're able to apply some discounts through discounted purchase of solar credits, we are still sort of feeling that pinch. And it has been a place where in years past, if you sort of go back to those FNF budget transfer reports, this is not necessarily a new conversation. So they have, sort of routinely come forward knowing that we haven't quite been there. But as we sort of look to right size our budget, that's one of those places that we want to make sure we have appropriately allocated funds, so that we are not in turn making decisions about being able to buy, other materials for our schools in order to keep the lights on.
Because the lights are important.
Yes, they
And
are.
they turn off at 10. So the two other items here, district float nurse, this is a smaller number, but we have historically funded our float nurse through our CSHS grant, and that is ending and will not be available. So we will either have to look differently at how we provide nursing support. I would say the interesting thing about this float nurse is one of the biggest challenges we have is getting substitute nurses, and so the float nurse, manages to do that for us. And also, I know that we have increased numbers of student health needs where the need for nursing and sometimes maybe even direct one-on-one nursing support is going to be there. So this is just something that's on our radar.
Yes, Dr. Silva.
The $90,000 utility increase, what is that in percentage based on what you're spending?
Our current utility budget, I think, is roughly about $1 million.
Okay, so it's 10%. roughly. So even with all this, with the solar arrays that have been put in place,
So the way that sort of the solar credits and the solar fields are allocated, my understanding, and correct me when I'm wrong, Mayor, or we will defer to some of the folks in the mayor's office who are really actively involved in the allocation of solar credits. But the schools benefit from the solar fields that are on the dump. And those solar contracts, the way that they were set up when they were procured, we can buy solar at sort of 85 cents on the dollar, solar credits. And so we see about a 15-cent per dollar savings. And my understanding is that the solar canopies that are in the middle school and the high school in part support some, maybe some of the middle school, but also support some of the other cities' buildings. Did I get that mostly right, Mayor?
Yeah, I just find it difficult to, with the solar arrays in place.
Yeah, but
not-
if I could, we don't, none of it's behind the meter. We don't generate solar and use it in the building where the panels are.
Okay,
Because the state program for the last 20 years has put, the state program put the incentives in a way that we couldn't build them and own them ourselves. So we had to host them and have somebody pay, to put them up. But it also, the incentives put the programs which you call in front of the meter. So whatever's generated goes into the,
right, which means
Into
they
the
can
grid.
resell it at, whatever the rates they want, and then also upcharge you or charge you whatever.
no. You know what?
Yeah,
We
this
probably
might be
should have,
different.
I will tell you that
It's a longer discussion, yeah.
we have power purchase agreements for all three main projects, the one out at the airport, the one at the landfill, and the one at multi-sites, including our high school, middle school. As Ms. Puglisi said, we buy the credits give us discounts on our bills, so we pay less on our bills because of the credits.
But there's still a 10% increase.
But that has nothing to do with that. I mean, that's a projected utility charge increase. I know that DPU, it was in the headlines today, DPU told the utilities to cut their gas rates by 5% because they were getting too high. So, I mean, it's about what they charge for gas and electric and oil when it comes to Centerville.
Yes. And then historically, too, there have been some times, my understanding is when the price of electric is such that it's advantageous to buy additional credits, the city does so. And so there have been times where we have purchased more credits and been able to benefit from them for a longer time, including over fiscal years.
Yeah, I'm happy to set up
And-
another meeting to talk.
Has this
I
been,
would love
It's a
to know
lot,
the
okay.
return on investment in terms of,
Yeah.
what the city's getting
yeah.
from that
So,
Great
investment.
topic
so
for
we invested nothing. We spent no dollars for any of these panels anywhere in the city. They're all private investment.
Yeah.
We've received, depending on the program, there've been 3 different arrays at 3 different points in time in the state program. And so we've gotten rental payments, we've signed power purchase agreements that allow us to buy a certain number of credits from what's generated. So and it's very complex, and I'm not going to say any of it
that's
right
why I think
if I
it's
dig
a
into the
regular
details
meeting.
beyond what I'm
Separate
just
meeting
saying.
is-
It's been a while since
Yeah.
anybody's done that. Here, have you done it at F&F lately?
We have not, we have it on the,
Y'all are killing me tonight.
You're gonna need more meetings. You're gonna need more meetings.
By y'all, who do you mean?
No, we haven't,
But
for at least a year, at least
we
a
could do
year.
it here. It doesn't have to be at F&F. We could do it here.
I would say maybe we could shoot for June after we vote on the budget. That would be a lovely conversation to have in F&F for June. Because it's not, and what I will say about it, there is a volunteer organization called the Clean Energy Advisory Committee. And there are other entities in the city of Beverly. There's an entity that is in charge of the array on the hill at Beverly High, which is separate and distinct from what the mayor just talked about. And so it is, to say that it's a complicated is an understatement, but if you kind of think about it as all of that energy going into, or all the energy credits going into a pool, and then both halves of the budget pull out of that pool. And so I could see where maybe somebody would look at it and go, well, the solar canopy here and the solar canopy over there, those are on school buildings, those should be offsetting school bills, and it should be that simple and direct. It's not.
Because they're
And
not
we can-
behind the meter.
and partially because we're in front of the meter. And we can absolutely delve into the long, storied, ugly, complicated mess that it is in June.
That's what I'm
In June.
interested in. I'm
In
interested
June.
in knowing what the numbers
Matt-
look like.
Just for clarity, the people who manage, the people who are on top of all this are the city finance director, the city sustainability team, and the business director at the Department of Public Services, who manages the billing directly. And then they work with you, Ms. Puglisi, when it comes to the school bills. So that's the group that we should have in when the time's right.
Okay. Last one on this list, now that I put a piece of candy in my mouth, sorry, is the Salem After Dark CTE program. So the After Dark programs are phenomenal. They're going really well, and they're very popular. And we have 39 students enrolled in our After Dark program this year. I want to remind you that we received grants to begin and initiate the programs at each of the schools. We received grants in the first 2 years of going to Essex Tech, and we have students that attend Essex Tech. And we had a grant money last year that helped us with our After Dark. We have a grant pending that has been pending for so long that neither Emma or I are holding out great hope that we're going to get that grant. It's still pending. They haven't said no, but they haven't issued it. We do pay tuition to Salem for the After Dark program of $50 at the cost of the incremental increase that you get from Chapter 74, and that is $5,500, so to speak. The challenge is that that money doesn't really all come back to us in Chapter 70 money because of the way that net school spending is and because of the formula of everything. We really only get back about 21% of that in our Chapter 70 money. So we need to put money into the appropriated to fund that program for the students that go there. And to that amount of money would be, we are anticipating it at $167,000 for next year.
Go ahead, Mayor Cahill. I was going to say, who do we need to shake down to get that grant? But go ahead, Mayor Cahill.
I was going to say, who's the grant application with?
Yes.
It is. And Desi somehow thinks that we can afford to pay for this ourselves
So this is,
after a year or two of their help. I mean,
it is that was the
it's
program.
fantasy land.
But that is the program, right? The program is that, they funded the startup.
No,
they
I get
funded
it, I get it, I
That
get
was, they were funding grants to start it up. And I will say, I would direct you to look at was it Sissel last 2 weeks ago? FNF a couple of weeks ago. I mean, it is greatly benefiting our students. And so, I think it's something that, but I was, Emma did a great job explaining to me. I think that we were under the impression when Heidi presented to us 6 years ago that all of the money, the differential, would show up in our Chapter 70 funding. It technically does, but then when they apply the net school spending and the required net school spending from the city, it erodes away about 79% of that money, which is a math lesson that I got today, which I was unaware of. And yet I will petition loudly and advocate heavily that we find that this will be part of our new budget. It will be my recommendation that we keep this in the budget because it's a program that really benefits our kids. So that's where we are with that one.
Mayor
When
Cahill.
was the application submitted to Desi?
October 8th.
So we applied as we were eligible to, and we just haven't heard.
So I don't have a good financial brain to tell you all of the things. My thought is that it's part of a pool of money that they're just not ready to make final decisions on because they're not going to release it until they know what they have.
Right.
That's just my thought. And I think, we'll find out. It's round 2 of the CTE money, which we applied for, that we're in, and they just haven't released the round 2. They released round 1, but not round 2. Okay? Oh, I forgot this complicated one. All right, this This one is this is a chart that I have not really shared with you all before, but I think it's really important as we go into, because I keep talking about revolving offsets and the plan that we had, and Jean spent a lot of time talking with all of you about offsets, and so there's nothing up here that's a surprise to us. We knew that this is where we were going, but when I look at this, what this just basically does is take a list of all of the revolving accounts that we also have in addition to our appropriated budget, and it lists them out, and it actually lists for circuit breaker you're familiar with, our circuit breaker, but here's what we really needed you to see. The circuit breaker starting balance at the beginning of FY25 was $3,206,635. We anticipate our revenues to be $3,618,544. Our budgeted expenses on circuit breaker this year is $4,300,000. Which means that we are projecting an ending balance of $2,525,179, which leaves us at about 69.78% carryover, which is about 9% higher than Jean predicted. So we'll take that as a win. We cannot continue to budget expenses at $4,300,000 out of circuit breaker when we're not going to have a carry forward balance that's going to allow us to do that. So this is one area that we're challenged in right now. Similarly, with school choice, we had a very healthy balance of $1,015,157. We anticipate our school choice revenues to be $729,71. However, we've budgeted expenses into that account at $1,365,000, which leaves us with a carryover budget of $370,587, which is only sort of a 51% carryover, and really we target to carry over at 100%. We would like to target to carry over at 100%. What really hit us in the school choice was the movement of health insurance costs. We were marrying them up with the staff members that were taking them, as well as salary increases that were to the positions that were offset on that. And so that's an area that we want to continue to look at.
Is it still the case that this is school choice in, and that we do have a certain amount of school choice out, and the city has that on its sheets as a school-related expense, but it's not within our appropriated?
Our local aid, the city side, the local aid gets attached and sent off. It's not part of Chapter 70.
And it's not, so there is some expense, it's just it doesn't hit our books, it's attached to the
It's the
local
city's,
aid.
yeah.
And it goes to the other city.
Same with charter out.
Yeah.
Charter
So
and
those are all
school choice
Schedule
out.
19 expenses, right? When the city pays for something directly that doesn't go through the school budget. So those are Schedule 19 expenses.
And like I said, when our local aid comes in, that gets attached, it doesn't come to us, it gets detoured over by the Department of Revenue.
Madam President?
Just to kind of, I have the information for all of these other revolvings here. Transportation receipts, actually transportation receipts, our carryover is strong. We had a strong carryover, and we are planning to spend that down, but we plan to spend it down over a 2-year period so as not to hit the budget all at one time. Facility rentals is another one. We have a healthy carryover there. Preschool tuition, that one goes up and down depending on the number of preschool students that we have, but again, we're comfortable with the carryover there. Athletics is another area that we would have on the watch list. We're only anticipating carryover of 53% in that. A lot of that has to do with increase in expenses for rentals of facilities, for costs of officials, for
Coaching
equipment,
stipends.
and coaching stipends that we have. The coaching stipends increased as well. We are really good with our special education tuition in terms of what we have for offsets. That's where we wish every one of our accounts were, right at that 109 number. And then this is the SEVIS account that we talked about, non-resident tuition. Again, spending more than we're taking in, we're trying to spend it down, but we also are cautious that we are way down in some of the others. So this is just something that we're trying to look at the budget this year as a whole, a whole, what are all the buckets of money that we have, and how are we making sure that we're utilizing them as best we can?
I might have seen a hand, Ms. Visnick.
Yes, I just wanted to say, like, for instance, the choice in, choice out, and the fact that the city pays the choice out bill, but we get the choice in money because of how the revenues coming in happen. That's one of the pieces of the complication that I was trying to say to Dr. Silva, right? Why we then don't just divide our electricity so cleanly, because in fact, our expenses are not really divided cleanly.
Thank you.
All right. I'm getting to the end, I promise. Appropriated budget, so this is just last year's. The city contribution was $63,258,119. This Chapter 70 money was $15,008,945 for our total budget of $78,267,64. We do only have the governor's proposal. If you remember, it goes through stages. So right now, the governor, we are a minimum aid district, one of 232 districts that have fluctuated back and forth. We anticipate in the governor's budget, $75 per pupil. We're all advocating for an increase in that. We'll hope for an increase in that. And then in the meantime, we'll be working and looking. But I think if you look at the money that we just talked about, we have a lot of work to do in order to get where we need to be. This is another new graph that is a really interesting way to look at our school department by funding source. So I will read these to you because they're not very big. The bottom, we have revolving funds in the blue, right? No, that's Chapter 78 in the blue, local contribution from the school department in the orange. I'm sorry?
For the school department.
Local contribution to the school department appropriation budget, that's your local contribution, the orange. You're the big orange field. The green is federal grants.
No, the next green is local contribution via the City of Beverly appropriation, so that's that school choice out,
Schedule
charter
19.
funding, Chapter 19 expenditures.
So these are the expenditures that don't show up in the budget that you are direct pay from the city. The blue is federal grants. This very little line that you can barely see is state grants. That's a red little line that's actually in there. The lime green is National School Lunch Program, and then the top is our revolving funds. So you can see where this is how we funded our school in our FY25 budget. That's sort of the breakdown of where the money is coming from and where we're spending it. So,
And the three columns before that are just the actuals for the 3 prior years.
so this is FY22, FY23, and FY24.
Mayor Cahill.
I just want to ask, since you stumbled over it a little bit, and there's so much confusion in the community, not just this year, all years. The blue at the bottom is Chapter 70, that's money from the state. The, whatever that color is.
Orange.
Is city tax dollar contributions to
Correct.
the school budget. And the green again is,
City tax dollar contributions that get budgeted through city budget lines, but that benefit the school department.
So your school choice, your retirement.
health insurance.
Health insurance that, no health, well, health insurances are. A
But
retirement
retiree
health-
health insurance.
so, right. Debt service on school buildings,
Yes.
things like that.
Yes.
We have to report every year school spending, and
Right.
Bryant reports
Right.
in this Schedule 19, expenses that aren't going directly through our appropriated budget, but that the city is still spending on schools. And that's what that green box.
And
bucket is.
since Dr. Trochik mentioned retiree healthcare costs, let me just jump in on that. Because on pension, right, the city handles pension costs for city employees. The pension for school retirees is handled through the Mass Teacher Retirement Fund. But for all retirees, schools and cities, the city pays the it's called other post-employment benefits. It's the health care for retirees. The city pays all of that for all school and city retirees.
I'll try to stay healthy for you.
You're going to run a TED Talk on that?
Oh, what?
A TED Talk.
Maybe.
Again, here is this is just the legislative process, the Chapter 70, what we got in '25, $15,008,945, what the governor's budget has proposed for us, and we anticipate House Ways and Means comes somewhere in April, Senate budget comes somewhere in May, and then we'll be looking at knowing our final Chapter 70 number by June. So our next steps is just to continue doing this work, reviewing enrollments and staffing needs, reviewing costs associated with each department, and then putting together the created proposed budget and collaborating with the city around how we're going to pay the bills. And that is what I have for you tonight. I know it's a lot more information, but I thought that it's going to be a complicated budget season, and I wanted to make sure that you all had what you needed to be thinking about in advance as we go forward. I think it's really important that we think comprehensively about what we have to do and how we have to meet it. I am very grateful for the conversation tonight, and I hope it was helpful for all of you to have, sort of that more in-depth discussion around what we have. I know that tomorrow night at FNF, they're going to talk grants, federal, state, local, all grant things. And so we're going to continue these conversations to make sure you know everything you need to know, and then, you'll be tasked with the tough decisions around how we have to make it work.
I would just offer, since we're at an open session, this is our only real opportunity to talk, that I think as we have started to provide more information to the public, to be more transparent, I think it will be important to partner with Emma to perhaps come up with some graphics and some better ways to communicate to the public, because it is kind of insider baseball. This is my 9th year, 10th budget, something like that. And I still want to make sure that I understand all the levers and pulleys, and this affects that, and this revenue source is contingent on, entitlements or our fee schedule, what we charge, our scholarships. There are just so many pieces to it. So, I know that this committee was interested in providing as much information as possible, especially since more people seem to be actively concerned and engaged. And so our website will be a good place for us to try to uncomplicate this. And as we have questions, and we've done this for a little while, we should be trying to think of sort of the FAQs, or the frequently asked questions that we have. Maybe if you don't mind, Emma, because we can't really work outside of open meeting, if we can shoot those kind of FAQ types of things to you, so we can maybe have a sort of consensus of what types of information our constituents are asking, what kinds of information deserve extra clarity. And I think that will help our community understand, as Dr. Churchick said, it's going to be a tricky budget year, especially if we're only getting $75 additional per pupil in our Chapter 70 funding. That hurts a lot, right? And if our reimbursements for circuit breaker and for transportation expenses and things aren't living up to what we had hoped due to revenue shortfalls in our state budget, I think we're going to have to really be able to present the information in a way that's a little bit more understandable than rewatching this meeting, because I think a lot of good information was brought forward tonight. But if we can present it on our website, I would like to enlist everyone's help and through Emma, so that we can kind of collect those questions.
Thank you.
No other questions? Okay. I need to figure out how to share the chair's slides.
Do you want me to do it?
I can do it. I have it open here. I just want to make sure I grab the right version, and I go from Zoom always jumps on top of. Okay, it should be very quickly going. There we go. Okay, so for the chair's portion of the agenda, I don't want to go too quickly, so please do ask if you have questions along the way. But I took the slide deck that we had the last couple times we met, and I've just updated that for us. We had our mission statement, checked off a lot of things since the last time we met. We've got our draft timeline that's up on our website. The superintendent search is right at the top banner of our district website. People can click on that. The timeline is the landing page, and each of the items that sort of relates to it are highlighted as hyperlinks and also listed on the right-hand side. And tonight we are going to just finish up on announcing the screening committee and the recruitment materials. I want to thank everyone for their time Monday night so that we could spend some extra time with our MASC facilitator, Alicia Mallon. Unfortunately, the brochure with all of the updated sections that we got from Darlene and from Mark Thomas aren't completely in a package that they were ready to share it with us tonight, but it will be shared sometime tomorrow before it would be published on Friday. And I might have to enlist some help from Dot or from Sue if there are any significant changes. If they're typographical, certainly you can do that through the chair via email. But I think a couple of us are professional proofreaders, and we'll give it a good go. Objectives for tonight is to confirm our advertisement and brochures. Again, unfortunately, I don't have a copy of the PDF, but I did get the language and passed it along, as well as the correct logo for the district versus the high school. We had one position that we added for the Director of Opportunity, Access, and Equity. It was missing from the list because it wasn't in the sample list, and I don't think that changes our numbers, but. Okay, so I want to back one out. Thank you. That was my question for you. I should have, texted you. So we'll do that. And then what our plan is to have all of this posted on the MASC website and distributed via all of the channels. We'll talk about that more specifically in a minute. And then the screening committee appointments. But then for our next meetings, the school committee itself will really be sort of in a waiting mode for the finalists from the screening committee. But I wanted everyone to start making note of the dates. So I'll have a slide of the dates. This package will come to you at the end of the meeting, so you can put them on your calendar. When the finalists come and do their school visits, they will also have stakeholder interviews with our educators and with parents, and then interview with us. And we'll do that in 1 week's time. And that is currently scheduled for April 14th, 15th, and 16th. And then the school committee will need to take feedback from those listening sessions and stakeholder sessions before our vote, which could be as early as the 17th or on April 18th. And I know that's going right up to the April vacation week. If anyone sees a real conflict with this, they'll have to let me know. But for all intents and purposes, that week of the 14th through 18th, I really need people to block off as best they can. Mayor, Ms. Visnick.
If, as Dr. Silva has repeatedly requested, that we get 4 candidates from the screening committee for us, rather than, certainly we want more than 2, right? And we've talked a lot about how many, in between 2 and 4, 3 or 4 being the preference. If we have 3, then you just named 3 dates, and that makes it easy to put 1 on each date. But if we have 4, would the 4th come on the 17th, or would they come, I'm not looking at a calendar.
I think it depends too on our candidates' availability. I think MASC has the resources to chaperone 2 sets or 2 candidates in the district on the same day, as long as they're going to different schools and meeting at different times, and we would just have a really long night.
We would.
We would have a long night.
And one of the 2 of them would have to wait while we talk to the other one.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we said up to 4. We said we would prefer at least 3, so. Okay, Dr. McKenzie.
Sorry. I'm hoping this is a really quick question. I already know on the 14th I'm not available in person. Are these in-person meetings? I assume they are.
Historically, they have been, because Zoom wasn't an option, but I'm sure we can make accommodations. So long as the chair and the quorum are physically present, I think is going to be the new route.
Okay. I mean, I'm traveling that day. I just don't remember when I get back. So hopefully there's
Yes.
no need for that, but just
Yeah,
wanted to ask.
the other thing of note is that the school committee is not invited to any of the in-district visits or stakeholder meetings. They're pretty clear that those are an opportunity for educators and parents and caregivers to meet the candidates without our influence or view, and that we will receive, they'll have a QR code where they will provide feedback, and we will receive the raw information from the feedback from those sessions. And that's why we wouldn't want to vote like after the final candidate. We'd want to have time to look at the feedback from each of the 3 visits and reflect on our own notes before we come back together. So they will be meetings like later in the evening. So maybe it will work with your travel, maybe it won't. Did you have a question, Mayor? Not.
Friday Night Lights.
Yeah. There we go. Okay. Yeah, so there'll be the school visits, there'll be the stakeholder meetings where they'll provide feedback, there'll be the interview of the finalists in those special committee of the whole meetings that I named, and then the school committee will vote and the negotiating committee will pick up contract negotiations, which will be successful. I will just say optimistically. Mayor Cahill.
I guess I will suggest that if we were to have 4 finalists, it could work to have 2 interviews each of 2 nights. And the candidates don't necessarily have to be stuck if the meetings with stakeholders were staggered,
Correct.
you know? So, I mean, it could be coordinated in,
Yeah, and there'll be a dinner break and like a rest break, and so we could, yeah, that's how summer camps make it work with one kitchen. Yep, we can figure that out. But yeah, just please save those dates: 14, 15, 16, 17, potentially 18.
18.
Yeah.
Yep.
And there'll be a reminder slide. Okay, so tonight, we're progressing on our timeline. It's kind of an eye chart on the right-hand side, but that's our district landing page for the superintendent search. And the way that Steve Palomo is going to advance it is the red stuff is the stuff we're working on at the moment. This is a snapshot from earlier today. By tomorrow, it will be updated to the next steps. But you know, it's going to be super important that we get our screening committee oriented next week, because some of the work that the screening committee will do is going to be via a Dropbox / Google Drive once applications start coming in and they are vetted and they are to be considered. The orientation will really focus on the elements of our confidentiality and how we will work together to put forward candidates that might be semifinalists. Our application deadline, as we had described before, is the 15th of March. And so after that, that's when really the screening committee can reconvene on the 17th and start to, work through the applicants and, add some preferences for the facilitator to coordinate. Dr. Silva.
Dates 14th through the 18th, what time frame?
You didn't have your mic on. The time frame for the 14th through 17th would probably be our regular 7:30 meeting time. It will be in the evening because there'll be a lot of events during that day.
Unless we find ourselves doing 2 interviews.
Unless
in
we
the
find
evening.
2 and we need
It
to
would have
like
to be
stack
Could be
them.
like
Earlier.
5 or
Stagger
something,
them.
5 to
I don't
something.
think it would be that early at all, because both, if there were 2 candidates, both would need to have dinner and go through the stakeholders, et cetera. Don't want to get too much in the weeds, but I just felt like it's important because our calendars are going to be quite booked. We also have regular school committee meetings peppered in with all of this, as well as city council meetings and. The interviews, again, will be to be determined exactly what the start time is. Could be 6, most likely it'll be 7:30 unless we have multiple candidates. And then we will vote by the 17th or 18th. And again, those will be dedicated meetings just to this topic. We're not going to squish them into any existing meetings because those are going to be for budget. Okay, the stakeholder survey, again, we used Monday evening to meet with Alicia Mallon, our MASC rep, and to get an overview. This is more of a slide to let those folks know who hadn't watched our meeting, and we're going to get that up on BevCam shortly after this. It didn't quite load to the folder as I thought, but we will get it there. The stakeholder survey is really the preliminary oil dipstick, as she called it, to get enough information for the screening committee to hear from the community, to help formulate which questions and how to phrase the questions for the candidates. The big takeaways, we had 414 responses, which is pretty incredible. The breakdown is on the side between parents and caregivers from our elementary and middle school, some from our high school, and then a lot of community members also participated. The student, school, staff, and teachers were the most mentioned priorities in both the strengths and the weaknesses. And a characteristic for our next superintendent is classroom experience. That was repeatedly offered as one of the characteristics people wanted to see. They also repeatedly talked about strong financial and managerial experience. And then overall, the takeaways were about communication skills, availability, advocacy for students, honesty, integrity. And so those were the most sought after skills. That's an abbreviated version. If people wanted more information, BevCam will rebroadcast the full presentation. And then, as Alicia Mallon stated, there will be an opportunity for the finalists that get selected out of this pool to meet with the community, go through the schools while they're in session, meet with teachers just after school, meet with parents and guardians and other community members in the evening before they actually come for an interview. So there'll be another opportunity for people to provide feedback and whatnot. One of the questions that came out of our Monday night meeting is the screening committee makeup. The column on the left represents the makeup that was recommended and that was brought to this committee in our prior meetings. And then for our 2018 search, you can see it was pretty similar. There were some missing categories and fewer participants. And then in 2013, far fewer participants, where instead of each level, elementary, middle, and high, it was just elementary and secondary were the breakouts. And in the 2013, there were actually no student representatives. And at the time, we had an interim superintendent that actually ran the search, and they used Endicott College to do some survey support. The last time we used the UMass Boston team to provide our facilitation services, and we had one student participate. We also had one community member, but we didn't have anyone from special education or EL, and I would just reflect on the fact that we had intentionally added that this time because we know, especially through the stakeholder survey, that that's an area of concern. And so those are the targets and what they were in the past. And then tonight, we're announcing the screening committee appointments. So these map to the categories that we had. We have 18 people now. So that's, if you remember 2013, we only had 9 people on the screening committee. It was actually called the selection committee at that time, but really what we're doing is screening. And so those include our facilitator, 2 students, one at their end of their high school career and one just at the beginning. We have a business owner who's also a coach to our students. We have 3 parents that wear multiple hats. They have both elementary, middle school students, as well as membership in our CPAC. And there is a community member that actually works at the YMCA, which is one of our great community partners. And then a caregiver who is a middle school and high school parent with experience in education. In fact, our middle person as well as educational background in their resume. And then to jump over onto the right-hand side, educators, we actually have members from A, B, and C represented. Funny story is the para at Centerville that applied, Michelle Rocio, she actually has students at the elementary, middle, and high school level and had used her home address, so it was not clear that she was staff, but we welcomed her aboard after the initial notifications. We also have a literacy coach. We have our BTA co-president, Andrea Sherman. She's a middle school wellness teacher, as well as a middle school coach for some of our extracurricular after-school sports. We have Edgar De Leon, who is a representative of our Unit B. He's here at the middle school for restorative practices, also a parent to high school students here in the district. And we got a late application that fills our requirement for a high school representative. And we have a math teacher, Jan McDonald, who checked her availability and offered her services to the team. So well-rounded there. And then for our administrators, we're thankful that elementary principal Amy Blanchard will make herself available, as well as Mark Thomas. We do recognize the principals typically have staff meetings on Wednesdays, so it's going to be a little bit of a juggle next month, but I'm sure they'll figure that out. And then Bethany Splansky, thank you so much for bringing the perspective of special education. And to some degree, experience for the preschool. I think that's going to be really important as well. And Erin, this is your third tour of duty. So I think Erin will bring some institutional knowledge, but she is our central office support in case we have some of those hard questions about operations. As she will be there to be listening and to be liaison of who our next superintendent will have probably daily interactions with. So anyway, so that's 18 people. The slides have a link to the live page on our website. And next, recruitment materials and advertisements. Just wanted to say, I talked, sorry.
I didn't realize you were going to.
Oh, okay.
I don't really have a question about the composition per se, but I did get a lot of questions about the process. Could we talk about the screening committee appointment process?
Sure. So there is actually a policy. Well, I can't open it right now because I'm only sharing the slides and not my whole screen. But yeah, our BDB is one of our policies, and because we can't make decisions as a body outside of open meetings, there are certain tasks that the president has listed in their responsibilities, and appointing special committees is one of them. And historically, that's how it has worked in the past. Basically, we set it up that Donna accepted all of the Google Forms, and they were compiled by actually Steve Palomo and Donna through the, I think it was 11 and a half days that we had it open. We opened it on the 31st, and we shared the link to both BTA presidents. All of you received it, as well as the screenshot, and we sent it to the press, including Salem News, The Patch, Beverly Buzz, and at the time I didn't know Beverly Beat existed, so they didn't get it, but they will get future updates. And so there was an opportunity for people to apply. We had 65 people apply directly through the Google form. And then what we did was we took the form, and there were these check boxes for, are you an elementary parent? Are you a middle school parent? Are you an educator? And literally used Excel to slice and sort of see who fit the most categories, while also checking the availability. There were a number of people that applied that said that they knew of scheduling conflicts, and they had, expressed concerns about only meeting on certain days, or in some cases, people really wanted to meet on weekends. And so I talked with Alicia Mallon from MASC just to confirm the expectation. And because of the types of applicants we're looking for, they have to be after school hours, and they pretty much need to be weeknights. And so that was kind of, one of the constraints if people weren't able to meet the times. And then we, of course, had the shift of timeline. So I actually reached out to people that fit the categories. We had first choice, second choice, third choice, like for alternates. Reached out, reconfirmed, and that's where things have been shifting the last couple of days, is some people realized, oh, the third week of March is when my class starts. I'm going to be online in a class starting at 6 o'clock. I can't serve. But I think through that process of asking people their availability, asking people to check off which of the categories they felt best represented their role in our district, it kind of fell together with that and the availability. So,
Thank you.
Yep. Ms. Robinson.
Can we just address the many concerns we had with the number of administrators? I understand that when we looked at this, A, B, and C were together. But I think when it came out, what happened is it was very heavily people who were not in student-facing positions currently. So I just I just think it'd be important to address, just that, the makeup of the committee in terms of people's concerns that a lot of people, although very, very well qualified and very great candidates, do serve, the perception is that they do serve to benefit from being on this committee, from if an internal candidate is chosen. I just think we need to address it because it's out there.
I'm not sure I understand the question. I'm lost. Do you want to restate it or?
Sure. I think just by putting A, B, and C together without a clear plan for selecting representatives, like a number from A, a number from B, a number from C. I feel like it was, maybe that was a misstep on our part. Maybe we should have looked at that a little bit more clearly, a little more carefully, because the way the initial committee came out, it seemed as though there were a lot of people who were on the A, B, and C who were not, there was only one teacher at the time. There was only one teacher, like somebody who was in the classroom at the time. I know we have added to that, but I feel like it's caused a rift in the community, and I think it's worthy of addressing.
Okay, I don't see it that way. I will take a note for that. Ms. Visnick, did you have?
I think, Ms. Robinson, you say something about some of the people on the committee as it is right now. Forget what it used to look like, what it is right now. You're trying to say that some people on there, it's going to benefit them, but it's not going to benefit everybody. I mean, we're hiring a superintendent of schools for every student in this district. And the guidelines that we talked about, and I asked the other night to bring forth, if you would please, Ms. Abel, go back to that other slide, to bring back what the previous committees looked like. And, I think it's fair. Some people might look at the 2018 makeup and go, well, because I didn't like Dr. Chirocek, I don't think we should use a makeup like that. But look at the one before that. We have doubled the number of people that are on this committee. It is a pre-screening committee. And I am frustrated with the number of quote unquote what I'll call Monday morning quarterbacks. There was a process in place. Plenty of people had time. People had plenty of time to put their names in. We have a policy who gets to make the choice, and not everybody who put their name in could be selected. One of my best friends put her name in and thinks she's incredibly qualified, and she didn't get picked. And I'm not going to sit here and complain about that. So I don't know what else to do other than sit here and go, oh yeah, let's talk about how some people are upset about this. I look up there and I say, we got an A, I see an A, I see a B, I see a C. I see people who I understand some might say are not student facing, but I have a real hard problem with people saying Edgar's not student facing. The director of restorative practices is absolutely student facing. So I don't, short of saying we need to kick off an administrator, and honestly, the way our school district, administratively speaking, we vote policy, quote unquote, everybody over there, implements the policy, and it's a top-down structure. So if anything, more of the administrators should be saying, that's going to be my boss. Who's Edgar's boss? It's the principal of this middle school. That's how it goes. Who is, I don't know, Christine Mezza's boss? It's Julie Smith at Centerville Elementary School. And Julie Smith reports up to some superintendent. And at the end of the day, the superintendent reports to us. So I don't have any problem with this, and I think we're encouraging. I'm gonna not say that sentence. I'm done.
Mayor Cahill?
I'm all set.
You're all set, okay. I did want to add that the people were selected and then contacted in order of availability, and so there was a Centerville Elementary classroom teacher that was available and then not available. So I don't think that there was any intentionality of excluding anyone, and thankfully we had some people that were able to volunteer and or say, hey, maybe I checked off the boxes in the wrong order. I'm actually in Unit C, and I heard you're looking for a para. And I got to relook at the spreadsheet and say, indeed, below the fold, there is a paraprofessional.
I'd just like to say, given the time frame, the process, I think, has been great. The organization has been great. And based on what you showed with the history of the selection committee in the past, it's clearly including additional people to have a say in the matter. So thank you for the time and effort.
Thank you. I think there was a lot of intentionality to make sure as many stakeholders were represented. I think we were fortunate to have a number of people who wore multiple hats, who can bring perspective from, preschool right up through graduates. There's people on here that were graduates to Beverly Schools, right? So anyway, this is the appointments. The letter to the community did go out today, and barring any unforeseen scheduling conflicts, these are the people that will be meeting next Wednesday. And then there are some alternates. So before our orientation, if anyone had to swap out, we could, handle that. Okay. We're ready to move on. So the brochure should be ready tomorrow. I'll distribute it widely to give it one last look before we have it go formally. I asked Alicia Mallon today, and she had spoken to the graphic designer about Canva. That was something that was brought up on Monday. Typically, because they are publishing it on their website and they know that some candidates do like to print things out, they were typically using the PDF sort of 8.5 by 11 format, but they're certainly looking to incorporate more photos of our school and all of the feedback we gave them just about the general look and feel of the brochure. So we should expect to see that tomorrow. Again, if we could coordinate through Sue or Dot, if there are any really material changes that would need to be communicated to MASC, but for simple typographical, you can go through the chair. I'm allowed to do administrative changes. We talked on Monday about the number of distribution lists that MASC has at its ready, as well as the number of professional organizations it's a member of nationally. We will have this broadcast wide and far and all of that. MASC also works with a number of educational institutions that are focused on education, and they will ensure that it is posted to their job boards and websites and mailings as appropriate. And then we will provide the community a sort of a, here's the link if you know someone that you think is a great match for Beverly. This is how you apply. Also, I will hit all the medias again with the information that the link is now live on the MASC website. We'll link to it from our page, but it will be at MASC. That is the only point of application. No resume should be submitted to our district directly. So don't send them to Aaron. Don't send them to school committee members. They must go through MASC. They are the only point of contact. And I would say from this moment forward, no applicants should be reaching out to district leaders or members of the school committee. So at this point, we're, is it embargoed, or I don't know what the exact term is, but we're off the table. Has to go through MASC. They have multiple points of contact for people for whether they have questions or whether they're submitting their application package. And then the only question I had for this body tonight is whether we actually officially had voted for MASC to commence the search. I believe we did in one of our motions, but the close date of March 15th was sort of in question in my mind because we worked on the timeline away from the table with Alicia and myself. And so I was thinking that we might like a motion just to authorize the chair to have the MASC search facilitator open the application process with the brochure and advertising plans as discussed with a close date of March 15th, 2025.
So moved.
Okay. Thank you. Is there any discussion on this motion? Yes, Dr. McKenzie. DeFranza.
Mike?
I remember that there were already folks expressing interest just initially on just the announcement and the awareness. Have those individuals actually been submitting applications, or have they been on hold because we haven't
No,
officially opened it? I don't
In
know what
fact,
happened.
MASC said that they are very excited to get this open because they can't tell me specifically, but they have had inquiries, like
Okay.
we heard on the news that Beverly, where's the application? Why is it not on your site? I thought they selected you. So I think there are candidates.
Okay, thank you. I just wasn't clear if we had officially
But it's
done anything.
it's-
So then we think the 15th is enough time, then, if we haven't actually opened it?
Well,
It seems really short. I'm sorry, I don't mean to mess up the timeline, but, so if it's
Yeah.
not actually open yet, though, right?
It will be open on Friday, so the 28th, so that's two
2 weeks.
full weeks. Yeah, I think the 15th is a Saturday, yeah. Mayor
I
Cahill?
was just going to ask when it'll go live. It won't be able to go live tomorrow?
Maybe. I mean, we had a no later than Friday, but considering we didn't get the brochure back today, I mean, I don't know if she emailed it while we were sitting in here. Let me just check real quick, because then I could pop it on the screen. No, I don't see it. So I'll get it out to as early as you can tomorrow. If you can turn back thumbs up or, hey, we missed something.
Well, here's a question, because to Dr. Mackenzie DeFrance's question about is it long enough, we had that conversation last meeting somewhat. We could authorize it to close on March 15th, and if for some reason we weren't getting a response, we could extend it.
That is very valid. We have a meeting on the 12th, and so I could ask if the search facilitator is confident that we have a reasonable pool, or if we need to extend it.
I mean, I think we've been getting the indication from Alicia that that's going to be enough time, and there is real interest, significant interest.
Yep.
So,
Would you like to make a friendly amendment?
no, because if
Always
we
reconsider
know on
later.
the 12th that we're not getting responses, and we could
Yep,
figure out what to do
I'll
about
put it-
that.
I'll put
That
it on
makes
the
sense?
agenda, just as an.
Check in.
Yeah. That's March 12th, okay? Are there other questions, or, so the motion, oh, go ahead.
Is there any harm in extending, like, having the date be a week later?
Yes, our availability for our screening committee is the 17th, the
yeah.
third and fourth
Yeah.
week, and then we run up to April vacation, which we actually get this school vacation, yeah. So we don't want to move it
Yeah.
too far.
Yeah.
I think we were very intentional to try to get it to fit within
Right.
the constraints of our calendar, because then we also then have our budget public hearing, and we lots of things, and then graduation, and then, yes, it's gonna be great. Okay. So the motion on the table is to authorize the chair to have the MASC search facilitator open the application process with the brochure and advertising plan as discussed with the close date of March 15th, 2025. We have a motion from Ms. Bisnick, a second from Jeffrey Silva. We've had some discussion. Any more discussion? All those in favor? Counting 7-0. Okay. That was that. Oh, and I guess I had one more slide. This is just the next steps. Again, this is coming to you in the packet tonight. These are the dates to mark on your calendar. Full day visits to the Beverly schools from April 14th through 16th. And then the interviews will be those same evenings, and a vote on the 17th or 18th. So that week, we really need to block out. Okay. Next on our agenda is the resolution that we took up at the last meeting. Ms. Robin,
So moved?
did I not? No, we had,
I just raised my hand to ask to
Okay.
speak, that's all.
Oh, okay. I was
be-
going to introduce Ms. Robinson, but okay, go ahead. Is there a question?
Well, I think that upon further, and I might need to lean on you for a Robert's Rules kind of thing, I don't know that we need to edit the resolution. I think the resolution our body voted on and the preamble is, I believe, from Dr. Chirocek. And so I think that we could get posted as the resolution as we voted it last week with the preamble on the website as a preamble to it, as opposed to editing the resolution. I don't know I feel strongly that there were a lot of people here last week specifically for that purpose. And although we talked about, all right, we'll try to improve it. This didn't come to us with any track changes, so I have no idea how much it's been changed, if at all.
So,
Sorry, it's not in color, but there are highlights, so the only changes that I think
yeah. Let's have Ms. Robinson introduce it because I have to say that Dr. Morgan also had a chance to look at the resolution and has contributed to this as well. So, Ms. Robinson, why don't you introduce what we're looking at?
Sure, and so I'm just going to go through what's transpired over the past couple of weeks. So first of all, I want to take a moment to sincerely thank everyone who contributed their expertise and hard work to crafting this critical resolution. Lorinda, Vanessa Ford, John Mulady, Lily Reed, who's a school committee member in Watertown, Alyssa Raymond Reed, who was sitting here last week, who's her sister, who's is a Beverly resident, Emily Contos, and especially Abbott. I just really wanted to point out Abbott, whose contributions were invaluable. Your dedication is deeply appreciated. So here in Beverly, we're fortunate to have strong policies in place to protect and support our LGBTQIA plus community, but it is essential that we reaffirm our commitment. To that end, we have strengthened this resolution by adding a preamble, incorporating language from Dr. Chirocek's remarks at our last school committee meeting, and refining some key action steps to ensure meaningful impact. At the same time, we recognize that while many of us who contributed to this resolution are deeply committed to its purpose, most of us do not have the lived experience that it directly affects. So for this reason, we believe that it'll be essential to continue an ongoing, continuous dialogue with the students, staff, and community members who do, to listen, learn, and ensure that our actions truly reflect their needs and realities. I also propose that for the 2025-26 school year, the new superintendent continues to prioritize actionable steps to implement this resolution and support its ongoing evolution, ensuring it remains responsive to the changing needs of our community. This work isn't just about policy, it's about making sure every student feels seen, valued, and protected. I urge my colleagues not just to approve this briefly amended resolution, but to actively support its implementation, ensuring that our schools remain places where equity and inclusion are more than just words, they are lived realities. So, Madam President, I'd like to make a motion that the committee approve the amended document, which I apologize to getting to you folks so late, but a lot of big conversations happened, and I just wanted to make sure we did the best we could with like something this important. So the title is Resolution to Support LGBTQIA plus students. And so if I could, I'd like to first share the preamble and then go over the amended resolution that I shared with all of you. If maybe we could put it on the screen. I don't think, maybe just for the
I can, if I can try.
record.
Is there another copy?
Yeah. Everyone has, oh, you don't? Oh, sorry. So, and what I did on the resolution was I bolded the changes that we made to reaffirm our ongoing commitment to equity and inclusion and to strengthen the action steps that ensure our policies remain effective and responsive to the needs of these students. All right, so the preamble, this is a lot of what Dr. Trocheck had to, that she said 2 weeks ago. So hate has no home in our schools. Our commitment to non-discrimination on the basis of gender equity in our public schools remains steadfast and unchanged. In response, our school and district leadership will continue to implement best practices to uphold DESE's comprehensive policies designed to protect, affirm, and support transgender, non-binary, and LGBTQIA plus students. We recognize that our future as a free and just society depends on every child, every family, and every educator feeling that they belong and are treated with unwavering dignity and respect. It is essential that our schools continue their support for marginalized students to reinforce that students from all backgrounds and experiences belong in our schools and in this community. Our school and district leaders will continue implementing policies and practices that protect all students, including transgender, non-binary, and LGBTQIA plus students. And then the resolution largely remained unchanged for the whole first page. And then, oh, good, it's up there. So the first, now therefore be it resolved, we just added that the district Title IX coordinator would serve as the primary contact for families regarding LGBTQIA plus issues to ensure clear, open, and transparent communication with students and their families. And if we go down 2 more, be it further resolved that the committee recommits the district and schools to continue to ensure that curriculum include diverse perspectives, and then we added and offer access to training and or professional development on LGBTQIA plus cultural competence and strategies to combat bullying and harassment. And then be it further resolved that the committee declares the district to be a safe space for its students, meaning that the district is a place for all students to learn, to thrive, and to seek assistance, information, and support free from discrimination and bullying. So really, all we did is we recognize that this is an important issue that needs to continuously be reaffirmed, discussed, and we know that we have to keep doing this, and we just put a few actionable steps in there to it wasn't really improvements, it was more just like specifics.
There's a spot in the first paragraph where you can just put LGBTQ. You don't have the I.
Microphone.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm
I'll
sorry.
get it. I can add it right now. So,
Yeah. And then there's a comma before that long hyphen. So you've made a motion to approve the amended version. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mayor Cahill. Thank you for reading it out loud, and we understand sometimes things take a little bit longer than we anticipate. Are there comments, questions, comment? Dr. Mackenzie DeFranza.
I'm Rusty. I was out of town due to a death in the family and feels like I missed a lot of really good discussion. And I wasn't here for any of this, unfortunately. But I had a chance to glance at it when I came in because I understand there wasn't time to get it out to everyone. What I want to say, because I don't think you should critique things you weren't part of the conversation for. And I do not want to rewrite this, and I do not want to make an amendment, but I do want to say something that I can say without a whole lot of preparation. And that's, the statement I posted on Facebook to me reaffirms that our district has not changed and wavered in our behavior and in our expectations of how we treat all children. I do have to say that I have been concerned over the past few weeks about many issues, and I was disappointed that I felt like we did not address the much larger landscape, but I don't have a resolution to propose tonight. I am very worried for our families that are seeing parents deported, and our children are missing school, and not getting services because they're afraid. They could be here entirely legally, but just have fear. I am worried about children who are in affinity groups of any sort who feel like they cannot peacefully and safely assemble and express themselves. So I just think there's a whole body of things here, and I tried to do something that spoke to our commitment as a district to really honor all children. And I don't want to leave out our children who have visible and invisible disabilities. Because when you look at bullying, not only do we have the community that we're actually, we're voting on this resolution, but there's so much bullying that I personally get contacted about with regard to disabilities and with regard to racial incidents in our schools that we don't talk about as a committee and that doesn't get discussed in public, and that I, because of who I am maybe, I hear about all the time and try to address either personally or with the school if I'm asked to participate. So I just want to say, without critiquing this, because I support this and I support loving on all our kids, but I don't want us to do this thinking that there's a hierarchy of need or bullying likelihood, because believe me, I hear about all sorts of things. And right now there are families that are terrified to send their children to school. And that is very pressing. And I did note Dr. Trocheck pointing out that even our EL numbers are going down as a result. And I think that shouldn't just slide under the radar. That is real and meaningful to our families and very scary to a lot of people who are living with that real and present danger. So I appreciate our community stepping up for this particular issue and sending emails about it. But I want to make sure that we don't continue to further marginalize the real issues of other groups of people who are marginalized by not at least acknowledging tonight that we are aware of their contributing to this conversation and acknowledging that they too are suffering in different ways. But as a district, we really need to say clearly that all children, background, identity, socioeconomic status, immigrant status, disability status, linguistic status, whatever you can think of, housed or unhoused, are all our children. And that's all I want to say.
Thank you so much, Dr. DeFranco.
Well said.
Mackenzie DeFranco, thanks. I don't know that anyone can follow that. Should we just vote on the amended resolution? All those in favor? 6-0. 7-0, thanks. Thank you for that effort and for the long list of participants that helped you get the amended version, and of course, the original authors as well. Thank you, Ms. Visnick, for putting it forward 2 meetings ago. We have a bunch of policies in our packet. I just wanted to take a moment that the policies that we're looking at in these committees are intended to have the fresh perspective of our experiences in the committee. And when we look at policies, we should be in our first reading saying, hey, yeah, this makes sense. This is how we do things. And I'd like to say that, in some of these cases, these are based on Mass General Law and our Home Rule Charter, and they're not coming forward with lots of changes. But it doesn't mean that we shouldn't really carefully review them and think about them, because our number one job is to set policies for the district. And I think that as we read through our packets, we should be cognizant of the fact that if we don't know our own policies, how can we expect others? And we don't want people jumping to assumptions based on things. It's usually in our policy manual somewhere if we're looking for something, and we have created as one large Google Doc so it is searchable. So for the committee of the whole portion of the policies tonight, we have for the first readings a series of items about how we actually govern. And from the chair's perspective, there were no reported changes from MASC, and there are no changes to Mass General Law. So these align. I also, in my opinion, believe they align with our practices. The only changes that I will suggest, and that will be in the packet for our second reading, is to change the his, her to their, the he, she to they, and to have subject-verb agreement. But I would ask each of you to take a moment to consider for our second reading at our next meeting, if we have any question about how we govern and how we operate, because we should have those discussions. If there are changes to our policies that we want to enact, that this is the opportunity to do that. We've looked at others throughout the October, November, and December timeframe from Section B, but, you know, this is sort of the heart of how we operate, how we interact with each other, what's permissible under open meeting law and Mass General law. So I would just add an extra encouragement for everyone as we review Section B in particular to make sure that we all are on the same page about how it is that we operate and organize and conduct our business. Mayor Cahill.
Are you looking for any?
I just felt like maybe we're a little bit on autopilot with some of our policy review, and, you know, there were certainly questions brought up from the community and from members of the table, and I want to say a lot of this exists. I have had the benefit of, before I even signed up to join this crazy crew, I actually read the policy manual cover to cover, and I participated with Ms. Visnick on the entire review with MASC. And so maybe I have a lot more background information. But I think it's really important for us as members, as we're doing this review, to actually take time to see and just check ourselves to make sure we're doing what it says we're doing.
So I had a question, but before you started talking, I was wondering if it would be seen as rude to ask if we should maybe table these for the next meeting because it's so late.
Yeah.
But I get that they're first readings.
They're first readings, and so I'm
Get that.
just imploring people to take a
Yeah.
look before our second
So-
reading, and we're not just going to rubber stamp.
So I did
Yes.
want to ask quickly then, on BDA, School Committee Internal Organization. As we are a school committee of 6 ward representatives and me, and I'm not eligible to be president, this language, the president must be a ward representative. I don't know how old that language is. Before the 1995 city charter, there were 8 members of the school committee.
There's going to be 8 again.
Right. There were 2 at-large seats, and now they're going to be 2 like half-at-large seats, right? So,
8 plus him.
yeah, I mean 9, yeah. I guess it was 9 before, yeah. So, so I'm just wondering if maybe that sentence should be struck, you know, because then if it stays, then 2 of the 8 elected school committee members, right, mayor being 9th, would not be eligible to stand for president.
Well, I think, I disagree.
Say it again?
I disagree.
So is that an
because
action item to bring to?
If you're a 4, 5, 6, or you're the 1, 2, 3, you're still ward elected, as opposed to the mayor, who knows how you get elected? Like, what is it
Do you
called?
want to
Mayor
have, do you want to
elected?
have an English language debate?
Not tonight, that's for dang sure.
Well, I flagged it because it struck me, and maybe it does, or maybe it doesn't make sense. I mean, anyway, enough said
Okay.
for now, because
So
it is
the,
late.
the chair will take that as an action to make an inquiry about if this covers those, those new seats. Okay, and Dr. McKenzie.
I'm going to be super fast because I see lights flickering.
Oh, boy, okay.
I thought about how
Mike,
we sometimes have moments where I feel in retrospect it would have been helpful for the public to understand why we had a certain process. For example, the selection of the pre-screening committee. And I'm wondering if, when we have these big events like that, whether we can, without a whole lot of extra work, just highlight the policy that will govern that process. And then put a link to it and folks can look at it. But I feel like it adds transparency without maybe us having to count on people looking at these sessions or taking the time to necessarily call central office and ask questions. But if we can say, you know, we're about to start our screening process, here's what the selection policy is, here's a link, boop. You know, and I don't know if that would be helpful, but I think that many of these things do become internal after you've been on the committee for a while, or, some of us are still learning. But I think that knowing that there is a clearly articulated policy, even if we're in discussion or amending them, I feel like maybe will lend to a sense of just better clarity about why things happen, because I feel like a lot of those questions that come afterwards are perhaps cleared up by explaining policy, but there's already a little bit of, tension that has to occur between then and when you get to respond, and maybe that'll be helpful.
Yeah, thank you. That's a wonderful suggestion. I think I've been reflecting on that certainly through this weekend about the fact that a lot of people don't understand open meeting law. They don't understand the constraints of a body that can only make decisions at the table, and how we've tried to be as prescriptive as possible to the letter in our policies. And so I think that's a very valid, and hopefully we can start that as soon as our next meeting, and linking policies and trying to get the public more informed about how the school committee actually works, because I have a feeling we're going to have to recruit some more people. If we're going to be adding at least 2 more people here, that means there'll be some new people joining. And so I'm still learning too. I do take for granted because I've been around a little while, but I think that's a really important piece, since policy is like our number one job besides setting the budget and, hiring our lead educator, Ms. Coelho.
All right. Here you go, Mr. Cahill. So on that sentence that you were talking about, ward representative, so the 6 of us are considered the ward representatives. When those other 2 come in, they're like the at-large. Wouldn't they be multi-ward representatives then?
That's a good question.
It wouldn't be
I'll ask-
considered the same, though.
I'll ask a city solicitor or someone with JD in their credentials. Okay, multi-ward, okay.
It is 1, 2, 3, somebody for 1, 2, 3, somebody for 4, 5, 6.
Yes.
Yes.
As Kim found out, all of my neighbors were Ward 3, but they've recently been redistricted to Ward 1. It's so funny. I was the last street of Ward 1, and now I have the rest of my neighbors, but yeah.
And the mayor can add this to his TED Talk. The reason why is that historically there used to be 2 citywide, like at-large school committee members, but what they saw traditionally was that those 2 seats were filled out of somebody either out of 4, 5, or 6. And so it gave unfair advantage in representation to those 3 wards at the expense of wards 1, 2, 3. So when they did this charter review and they decided to add them back in, that's why they split them, designating it to, so that every resident has approximately the same amount of representation. That's the goal.
Yeah. Okay. Taking
Motion.
into account the time. Well, there's no motion. These are all first readings. I just wanted to implore people to
adjourn.
Well, I have meetings and dates on the agenda. I think we covered meetings and dates sufficiently. Everybody, just block your calendar out for the whole month of March and April. You'll be here. We'll be together. I'll bring snacks. I will. No cots. I'm not sleeping here. No more toothbrushes and Advil and, yes, vitamins. Okay. It is 10:12. I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
Second.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Robinson. It's not debatable. We're all present. All those in favor? 7-0. Thank you, BevCam, so much. Thanks for anyone that's been watching us at home. We're a little slap happy at this time, but. Yeah.